Okay, everybody, I'd like to start the meeting, please. Thanks very much for attending. And I'd like to start with the Aboriginal Acknowledgement. We'd like to acknowledge the land to which we gathered as a traditional territory of the Tanaha, Cynics, and Selects peoples, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honour their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. And I'd like to ask for a motion to adopt the agenda with the addition of a late item that the Fuel Management and Fire Smart UBCM grant resubmission matter be added to the June 1st, 2020 regular meeting agenda as a late item, and that Council adopt the June 1st, 2020 regular meeting agenda with the addition of the Fuel Management and Fire Smart UBCM grant submission matter as a late item. Moved by Councillor Morrison.
And I have a lead item, so to add.
Oh, no, I was just moving the adoption.
Okay, moved by Councillor Anderson, second by Councillor Woodward. All in favour? Carried, thanks. And you have one more?
Yeah, I have another additional late item, and just put it down as virtual UBCM.
Virtual UBCM.
That's right.
You got that, Sarah? Okay, so with that, we'll call for a motion to adopt the agenda with the late items. Councillor Anderson, Councillor Page, any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favour? Carried, thank you very much. And first up on our agenda is the regular council meetings of May the 4th. We need a motion to accept those. Councillor Woodward, Councillor Renwick, questions or comments from those? Hearing none, all in favour? Carried, thanks very much. Recommendations from the Committee of the Whole, there were none. And the first one is the Slocan Valley Association request permission to borrow the sod cutter and ditch witch for a field improvement project for Little League Baseball at Slocan Park. The request was agreed to by the majority of council in principle by email, and council is now requested to formalise that decision. Moved by Councillor Renwick that the council direct staff to allow the Slocan Valley Baseball Association to utilise the City of Nelson's ditch, witch, trench and sod cutter for the one-time use at the Slocan Park Baseball Field Improvement Project. And who seconded that? Councillor Page.
Should probably just let everyone know Renwick's just off screen.
Councillor Renwick moved
Yeah.
and Councillor Page seconded. So Councillor Renwick is here. So with the social distancing, seems to matter on this side of the room, but nobody seems to care on this side of the room. So Councillor Renwick has moved further down the line here, so you may not catch him on the camera at this point tonight, but later on, hopefully. All in favour? Carried. Don't fall off the edge there, Jesse.
Yeah,
You're pretty close.
I'm trying to social distance.
Thank you. And B is request for Nelson District Arts Council regarding the mural locations. Nelson District Arts Council has requested that council allow 3 murals to be painted on city-owned property. Council is now requested to approve or deny the use of the city-owned sites for the proposed design. And the sites are identified in your package. And there is 1, 2, 3 recommendations in front of council for somebody or everybody.
I'll move the 3 of them.
I'll second.
I did want to,
We can do them together. Is that okay with you, Sarah?
can we separate them? I had a conversation.
Councillor Anderson has asked to.
So there's different locations here, but you want to put them all?
I think they need to be separate.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So
I'll
one at
move
a
number
time
one.
then? Okay. Moved and seconded by, moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Questions? Councillor Page, that's pertaining to number 1?
Yeah, pertaining to number 1 at 416 Vernon Street, and it's about the lighting considerations for the mural. We're finishing up that piece of the parkade. Something I've noticed having a business just down the street is when the manifest piece of art went up in the first place, at night, when the lighting on that building was not turned on, the piece was gorgeous all throughout the summer. The effect of turning on the exterior lighting on the parkade completely changes the intent, I believe, of the artist. It looks completely different once the sun sets. And I'm just wondering, both how we have a bit of a discussion with the artist about considering that the lighting is there and that it's part of the plan for the art piece, because this is building scale art, or if we can do something about either the color temperature of the lighting on the side of that building, or whether or not it's on. I think there was some.
Who's on the CDC?
I am.
That'd be,
About that?
Because this is contingent on approving
Yeah.
the design.
I will ask about that.
May I?
yes, absolutely.
I just wanted to say that I mean, I know we're doing one at a time, but I wanted to move them all at once. I thought they were really beautiful pieces, and you know, there's a lot going on in the world, and this brought me a little bit of joy. So I'm excited, and I'm looking forward to it for our community.
Thanks very much, Councillor Anderson. Any further questions on number 1? Hearing none, all in favour? Carried. And number 2, the council approves the use of the west-facing wall in the Civic building, 719 Vernon Street, for a mural proposed by the Nelson District Arts Council and designed by artist Brian Stevenson. Bryn, is that how you pronounce it? Okay, Bryn Stevenson. Contingent on the Cultural Development Committee's approval of the proposed design. A mover and a seconder, if that's okay. Councillor Renwick, Councillor Lochtenberg, second. Any questions or comments? Councillor Morrison.
So just, I got a email from a concerned citizen regarding this site. I mean, I love the graphic that we've been presented, and I think that the idea of the COVID mural is great, but there was some previous discussions around using that particular spot as a sports themed mural, and I'm just wondering whether or not that will get back on the list of things, or if there's any comment that can be given, because I think that there was a number of people in the sports community that were expecting that a mural was going to be coming short order to that particular building and site, and so I'm just wondering if staff has any comment.
They did apply for funding out through the CBT larger art grant and didn't get it. That's basically where it's at. So I know this one isn't meant to be, you know, a 20-year one like others. This is meant to be, and maybe you can incorporate the two pieces together if we ultimately get funding. But yeah, that's why I didn't go ahead. They didn't get the funding.
Okay.
John.
It's something else you might want to touch on with the CDC, Councillor Wood.
All right.
Okay. Councillor Page.
Yeah, I did want to articulate, I guess, for Jesse to take back to the CDC, which I think I may be the alternate.
You should go with them.
No, I think so. I think so. Is maybe we want to imbue whatever's going on that building with a sports theme, just overall in general for the next time. But I'll loop in and come with you.
Thank you. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Councillor Lochtenberg.
do you know that property there could be developed before too long? Was that communicated to the CDC that
I guess it's a 3 to 5 year.
3 to 5
5.
years? Yeah. Okay.
Further questions? Hearing none, all in favour? Carried, thanks very much. And number 3, the council approved the use of a concrete structure surrounding the hydro box on the right-of-way on the northeast corner of Front and Hall for a mural proposed by Nelson District Arts Council and designed by PJA Lila Gilderly, is that how you pronounce it?
I don't know.
I think so. I hope so. Contingent on the Cultural Development Committee approving the proposed design. Moved by Councillor Page, second by Councillor Renwick. No questions or comments? All in favour?
Great.
Carried. Awesome. Thanks very much. Next one is a development variance permit for 402 Robson Street. Pamela's up, and the development service has received a development variance permit application 402 Robson Street to reduce the minimum rear lot line setback required by the zoning bylaw from 4.5 meters to 2.5, and to increase the permitted lot coverage from 40% to 44%. Pamela, do you want to give us a little background, or is
Yeah,
council
I'm-
comfortable with what's in front of them?
I'm going to give you a bit of background, plus I'm drawn some fun shapes on here. So these are exactly the same. So these just go down this
Thank you.
aisle.
Thank you.
Okay, so this property currently has 2 lots, and they're both 278 square meters, so they're equal size lots. The lots currently run north-south, and the applicant would like to reorient them so that the property line runs east-west in order to legitimize the existing house that's on the property, that's built across the property line, and that's built towards the north end so that they could subdivide off the south end of the lots. So the zoning bylaw allows for the adjustments of lot lines in this specific scenario where a house is built across property lines, as long as no new lot created is smaller than an existing lot. So those lots need to stay 278 square meters. The variances are required due to the siting and the size of the existing home. So even though the applicant is removing the addition that's at the back, they're still 2 meters short on the rear property line. As well, they're over slightly on their lot coverage. So we sent out notification letters within a 16-meter area, and we received 3 letters that were not in support of this application. So the lot immediately to the south of this proposed variance, 1321 Stanley. So they said basically that these lots are small, and that really all you really get is house and parking only, and they don't think that the city needs this level of density in this area. So just to be clear, we're not adding increased density. The lots are already there. And so if you look at the front page on there, you'll notice that all of the lots in that area, basically from Baker Street all the way up to Delbrick, are all 25-foot lots. So it's, interestingly enough, this proposed variance actually conforms more to the underlying zoning than most of the existing development in the area, which is built across the property lines. So most houses there take up 2 lots.
So they're, through the chair, so if I'm getting this correctly, they're gonna combine them and then re-split them the other way? Is that?
Yeah, it's just called a boundary adjustment, which is a subdivision, but it's just a slight reorientation. So then 405 Gore Street, which just is to the south and a bit to the east, they said that the new house would impact their view of the lake and the mountains, and that they feel that the lot coverage is too high and would impact green space. So typically, residential zoning bylaws, they're looking at maximizing housing as efficiently and as sensitively as possible. I have yet to see a residential zoning bylaw that is about preserving views, because obviously that would just be really tough to preserve views. And in terms of the green space, yes, there will be less green space, and so this really is about the trade-off between these variances and adding additional housing. And so when we look at this from a staff perspective, we're really trying to make sure that it fits in with the context of the neighborhood. And I think from our perspective, we feel it's there, but I mean, really, this will be your decision to determine if that trade-off is warranted in this situation. And then 1323 Stanley Street, which is 2 houses up directly south of this proposed variance. Again, they felt that the area was already too dense. Again, it's a tough one when the underlying zoning already says that those lots can be there. So we're recommending approval of these variances for a number of reasons. I think that there are 2 fairly minor variances. We're not adding density, we're just maintaining the existing density that's already there. We're adding housing, and we're filling in the gap in the streetscape. So if you think about it right now, 1321 and 1323 Stanley both front onto Stanley Street, and then you've got that gap because the house of this proposed variance is built way north, and so you have that gap. And so it would be really nice from an urban design perspective to fill that in with a house that's fronting onto Stanley Street. So that's, I think, a good thing. Plus, preserving this existing house is good both from a heritage perspective as well as from an environmental perspective. And I think the thing that's kind of working in favor of this is that the grade that's going up that street is a 10% grade. And so if you look at the middle of that proposed variance lot to the lot that's immediately to the south, there's about a 10% grade difference, which is around 2.5 meters. And so which helps if once you get a development on that lot, it's actually going to feel like just about a story less, just because you're going up that grade. So that will help in that. So that's where staff are at.
We have a couple of questions. So Councillor Lockenberg's first, and then Councillor Page is next.
Do we want to have a mover and a seconder? Just as a point of order, do we want to have a mover and a seconder before
Sure,
we
we
start
can do
discussion?
that, yeah. So the recommendation from staff is, after presentation, that the application for the development variance permit to vary the requirements of zoning bylaw 3199/2013 in order to subdivide the lot as shown on the attached map be approved for lots 1, 2, Block 24, Plan NEP 349, District Lot 150, Land District 26, 402 Robson Street, subject to the existing house remaining as follows. To vary the permitted lot coverage from 40% to 44%, and to vary the minimum rear lot line from 4.5 meters to 2.5 meters. Moved by Councillor Page and second by Councillor Lochtenberg. Question, Councillor Lochtenberg, and then Councillor Page if you have one.
Pam, thanks for that. So through the chair, Pam, the one comment that the letter from Noreen Clayton, it sort of struck something with me that we hadn't considered or don't tend to consider, at least in a lot of these variances, is the impact on, what's the water doing in terms of the ground cover? So when you cover the land, is it affecting sort of the absorption and flow of water? So there's certain green infrastructure components that don't seem to get considered. Do you consider those kind of factors when you?
So that is where the lot coverage comes from.
Yeah.
And so Nelson is quite a bit, well, typically I think that municipalities are around the 40% lot coverage. And so we're at 35. This one is different in that it's a small lot, so we allow it to be 40. But if you're on a normal 50-foot lot, it's 35%, which is smaller than, I would say, a number of municipalities.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's simply for that reason, so that.
Councillor Page, do you have a question?
I have a couple things that jumped
And
out
Councillor Wood.
for clarification. So something I pulled out of the staff report is that you guys are recommending approval of the variance in order to encourage the conservation of the existing 120-year-old house, something I worry about too, when we do this struggle between density and preserving the heritage that makes Nelson so unique. I'm wondering, do we want to, or is it appropriate to attach a covenant that the house stay for a period of time after this subdivision? Because I did take note that this is a recent owner on BC assessment, and I'm just wondering if we want to at least put a couple years, a decade, 15 years, something that the house has to remain after the subdivision happens for the approval of this variance.
So a bit of clarity on that though, Pamela, if it's okay with you. It's not in the heritage zone. There's a lot of older homes in Nelson that aren't in the heritage zone. Doesn't mean that, I'm not suggesting you shouldn't put that forward. I'm just letting you know that that could be a snowball going down a hill going forward.
Right, this would be a one-off covenant that we would attach for
You're
approving
asking
this.
for more lot coverage, so you could ask for that, you couldn't on it.
No, you could definitely make an amendment and add that, or to the resolution for sure. I think right now it says, sorry, I seem to have lost my copy of the report, but I'm pretty sure right now it says, subject to the existing housing staying. I think that's how you wrote it, Alex. So I believe that the existing housing has to stay.
I'm sorry, yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. You've got me well covered on this one, so.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, through the chair. If they weren't looking for a variance, they could just build. Is that correct?
They could build a laneway.
They could build a laneway.
They could build a laneway house.
So I guess some of the letters here are concerned about the build and blocking views and density, but if it wasn't for the extra 2.5 meters, the person could just subdivide and build a laneway house. Is that correct?
Well, you don't
No, they cannot subdivide without these variances.
Okay. I'm just saying a build there could happen
Anyway,
anywhere. Is
So
that,
they could build a laneway, but the laneway, the highest the laneway could go, I think, is 6.1, 6.1, so
and this is
versus 10.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to be voting in favor of this for several reasons, and I think all three people that show concern bring up good points. Part of the charm to me, in our town, part of the charm of some of the older homes is the fact of where they are on the lot and the yard. And when you take a nice older small home like this and, I don't wanna sound crass, but jam another home in there, it just takes away from that charm of that house. And I've seen it happen for years and years all over. You know, I grew up here and there's beautiful homes down in Fairview that now have not very nice homes built beside them because people could subdivide, there was room. And it just, to me, it takes away from the charm of the home and the charm of our town. So I'm gonna be voting against this.
Councillor Page.
I had a bit of a follow-up to my previous question, and it was along what our policy looks like at protecting buildings like this without doing it on a piecemeal basis. Because one of the things we're bringing up, Councillor Renwick, is that an option available to the homeowner is to remove the house completely and then proceed. To remove the house completely and then proceed with the subdivision. So part of what this motion accomplishes, I believe, is giving the variance, but then also protecting the home itself. And I was leading to, well, how are we on a policy basis across the board protecting these homes so that's not really an option on the table? Like, it's an option on the table today for this homeowner or this property owner, but are we doing enough to protect these homes across the city and their accessories?
Right. I think I handed out my report to somebody, but I think the resolution already talks about
Yeah.
the home has to stay, but I don't think it puts a timeline on it. How long does it, like, if it's gone, has to stay for now? Well,
And I'm just wondering how our heritage, how we're working across the city at protecting these homes.
yeah.
What the policy is. I think is some work on your work plan around a heritage, maybe a heritage registry or.
No, so part of the CDC has CDC has a subcommittee called the Heritage Working Group.
Yeah.
And so they have received a grant this year, and so they've hired someone to look at all of our heritage policies and regulations. And so that will be part of what they're looking at. They're gonna do this review.
Okay. Councillor Luckenberg.
Thank you. Pam, so if I'm to understand correctly, you know, if they say we don't approve this, would a likely backup plan be that they would go for a laneway house? It's hard to understand what the motivation here, other than, as you say here, is just to bring it into compliance, but that's not what the owner obviously wants to do. They want to develop it.
They wanna subdivide.
They want to subdivide.
Yeah.
They want to subdivide it.
So if they don't get this, then their options are to build a laneway house.
Yeah.
So to consolidate the lots and build a laneway house, or to demolish and subdivide.
To demolish and subdivide. I see. Okay. So really then, I'm just trying to understand, because I understand Councillor Renwick's position and, you know, the letters, but this doesn't sort of remedy that, does it? Because like you said, if they don't get this, they tear the house down, they build two things, and you're at the same place.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if they were gonna tear the house down, they wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
They wouldn't need a variance.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, everybody clear? Any further questions for Pamela?
And the other thing you have to remember, the only reason it's here is because of this higher lot coverage, right? Otherwise, you would allow that subdivision anyway, right?
And the rear setback.
So,
Yeah, so those two.
right.
Yeah.
Which they could shift that, you know, if we didn't have this policy, they have to not change the size. You could shift that lot for the existing house a little bit, or that property line, and they would be within their 40%, right? And it's on, how much is it? Couple,
The lot would go down to 247 square meters.
how many feet would that add to that lot?
Oh, I think it was, I wanna say,
Not much.
no, it was like 8 square meters or something.
So really, that's all you're talking about, is that lot line. You could but get them both in compliance by moving that line, other than the other bylaw that.
Well, then you'd have to vary that to other regulations, so now you're back at the table with two variances, so just do
But I
it
think
once.
effectively, you have 25-foot lots in Nelson. We have a ton of 25-foot lots in Nelson.
Oh, yeah.
We do, and like I showed in that package here, just down the street at 415 and 417, they just removed that old home and replaced it with two small houses.
Yeah. Exactly. Councillor Anderson, you got a question?
It's not necessarily a question. So I am struggling with this one because I definitely want to see, our heritage buildings preserved. I completely understand the environmental argument. I mean, Pam did address that. And I hear what Councillor Renwick is saying. It sounds like there's a bit of a fear that they're going to tear this building down. Just so you know, the sale price of this house was $480 in July 2019, and the building's worth $330 with the land being worth $199. So I think it's unlikely that this building is going to be torn down. Like that's probably wasn't their business plan.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? All in favor? Could I see your hands again? 3, 4. Passes. Thank you. Okay, and next one is the Climate Resource Consultant request, a letter of support.
Mayor, for purposes of conflict of interest, I have to recuse myself.
Okay, thank you. Did you get that, sir? Okay, so Climate Resilience Consulting Limited has requested the city provide a letter indicating that it supports a protocol that the CRC is developing and would be interested in partnering with the CRC. Council is now asked to consider the request. And there is a recommendation if someone wants to move it.
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Woodward. Seconder?
I'll move it for discussion.
Second
Second
for discussion. Thank you. All right. Did you have something you wanted to say, either one of you?
I would just say that, future-proofing infrastructure is pretty vital avenue for any municipality to go down. And that's what this is all about. And so I think, just on a purely economic level, to be able to make to be able to sort of test things before you throw down millions of dollars is vital. And I think what's interesting about this too is you can stress test infrastructure by modeling it before any kind of build is happening. So I'm in favor of this because I think it's something that municipalities really could utilize over the long haul, especially over the next 10 to 20 years. So, thank you.
And just to clarify, it's not just for new, it's also existing. So they gave the example of Edmonton. A number of their bridges would fail at certain temperatures, and it's to predict when that is and make sure you're rehabbing those things before that happens. And I guess, they are a local company.
Councillor Page?
A question around this, and I hear the purpose of a problem to be solved, that we want to have a good sense of how infrastructure is going to respond to climate change. One of the questions I have about this, and maybe you have the answer for us, is when developing a protocol for incorporating quantitative projections and then baking into software without actually publishing documentation of the protocol and the methods being used within that software, doesn't really have the same reach in terms of how people can incorporate that into their planning. And I wonder what is being done to develop a framework that can be used, maybe not just by one company, but by multiple companies, because it's a little bit of like baking the recipe into the final product. I see a question here to ask us to ask them to express interest so they can take a framework and bake it into software and sell it. And I'm all for a bit of that, but if it's government dollars and it's us working towards the better good of everything, how much is that protocol being open sourced so that it can be checked and validated and grow beyond just the scope of this one company?
I cannot answer that. They're building a software product. I'm not sure what they're thinking around open source versus proprietary. data is.
Well, like,
I'm just not as familiar with this software, just.
do we have a proponent who would present to us on what exactly this request is? Because we would expect this in our building code, we would expect this in
Well, I
any
guess-
kind of work that goes into making these kinds of decisions.
Yeah, I guess we expect the grantor probably to do that level of due diligence. You know, we're saying we see a need for this, and we could, you know, ask them that, you know, if you want to say we would like you to address this when you're considering this application, and we can go back. I'm not. Do you remember, is this time sensitive?
Well, I'm looking for a date here, actually, Kevin. And I don't see a date on it, so, I mean, I think that's a very good suggestion from
Yeah.
Councillor
Yeah.
Page. I mean, I'm struggling with this myself. It'd be nice to get a bit of a feel for who the company
sure.
is and
Yeah.
who's,
Well,
you
you
know,
know Mel.
and how it's gonna, would that be?
Yeah, Mel would be more than willing to come present.
Councillor Morrison?
So I'm just wondering, can I move referral?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll second it.
I don't know, do we have room on the Cal meeting to squeeze them in there?
We can take a look. It's already looking pretty tight, but we'll see if we can find a way to accommodate it.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, and if these come up for you, then just let us know. We're, like I said, our kind of, you as the grantor would kind of get into that level of detail, and ours where we see a need and.
So hang on, we have a mover and a seconder, right?
Yep.
Okay, for referral? We're speaking referral now.
I just wanted
Are you speaking against referral?
no.
Okay. Speaking for it?
Yes.
Okay, so, any other questions or comments? All in favor of referral? Done.
Okay, we'll ask them to.
And if you have questions, please,
It's just a little bit of show your work, especially in this domain. I think we need to create documentation behind these things.
Yeah, I'm not sure what CBT's policy on that piece is.
And maybe a good ask in general. Okay,
thanks.
Ask them as well.
Thanks, Councillor Page. All right, onward and upward, folks. Sidewalk Cafe Amendment Bylaw number.
do we want to wait for Councillor Lautenberg?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Why bother?
He's gone. She's gone. He's gone.
What's that?
Sarah's going to get him.
Okay.
Ran away.
Making a sales call.
Yeah, lucky.
Latte.
They locked them in the planning department.
Look at the beautiful light. Golden hour.
Where did he go?
Doing a quick lap
Now-
around
now
City
we've
Hall.
lost 2 people.
I know.
Who's next?
A letter written by us. Letter written by us. Not the proponent.
There he is.
Thanks. I can hear you guys, so I had to go to the.
Oh, you had to keep going? Okay.
Yeah, you have to almost get to
Your
the
name didn't come
elevators
up,
to
your
get
name didn't-
past the.
Yeah.
Okay, so back at it. So staff is proposing amendment to the Sidewalk Cafe bylaw to provide additional flexibility in regards to the use of the on-street parking spaces. The minor changes to the bylaw could allow businesses to utilize additional on-street parking spaces for the purpose of expanding their seating areas. And Sebastian's here to give us a little bit of background on this. There's a fair bit in your package. You want to hear from him, there he is. If you don't, you can refer to your package.
I mean, I'm ready to move the recommendation proposed by staff. I think
Okay, so it's
great.
on the floor and questions can come up through that. So moved and
I'll second it.
second by Councillor Woodward, Councillor Anderson, and Councillor Woodward.
I just thought this was a really, really responsive, and I thought it was great. So I thank you for your creativity on it. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I particularly like that the adjacent, or the business in front has a say in the process. I think it just solves a lot of problems and creates a lot of opportunities.
Okay, any further questions? The one I had for, Cal, Councillor Renwick.
Sebastian, this is going to be temporary?
The ways, yeah, if it is meant to be temporary, we'd have to come back to council and change the wording again. But I mean, it's giving some discretionary authorities to the director so that we can evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. But it is very much to respond to this year, and then we may decide to change it or not. That would be really up to council.
Follow-up? So what's, I guess what's extraordinary circumstances? Who decides what are extraordinary circumstances? Because they might be different to you than they are to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think maybe the safest thing is in a year, in 2 years' time, we can bring it back to council. If we feel that we can't manage it at a staff level, then we'll bring it back to council. So far, we've been out having some conversations with different businesses on trying to figure it all out, and it's been pretty good so far. But yeah.
Sorry, Sebastian. So that was a question I had. And I really think that I talked with Pam today, and she said the permits were issued annually.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I believe it should be retained that way. This is being driven because we have COVID. Would we do this in normal circumstances? Probably not.
Correct.
Right. So I would hope that council will see this similar to myself and Councillor Renwick, that this is while COVID exists or for 1 year only. I really don't like the idea of bringing it back for another council decision again, because we've worked a lot to get the policy where it is today for street use and the reduction in parking stalls and decks, et cetera, and it's taken a lot of time and effort, many conversations with the community as a whole, as well as the business community. And I think this is being driven by the COVID outbreak, and I really believe that it should be retained within that framework and go back to the regular purpose it was designed for in the first place. So I don't know how.
I think just clarify, so what it says is, we still have 3.21 and 3.23, which is your normal situation, and it's only under extraordinary circumstances that this can happen, right? So there would have to be something extraordinary.
And temporarily.
Right, so I think what Sebastian's saying is, you could come back and remove this, however, unless extraordinary becomes, we're not talking about, we're talking a pandemic or something like that, not something minor. And you also have to remember that the province also
Dictating some of this, yeah.
allowed the extension of those patios to be able to achieve that. Not lose any seating because of the social distancing requirements. So they would have to both get through our Director of Development Services going, what's extraordinary now that we can sit shoulder to shoulder again. And, the province, the liquor would also have to agree that they could expand their patios, which is a whole process in itself.
So I think, Kevin, what I'm trying to say here is, I think it's important that message be very clear.
For sure.
And I didn't hear that. What I heard was, we'd have to go back to council to go back to the old, let me call it the old system. But I just want to be clear, do we have to do that?
No, the old system is still in place.
Because it's an annual
It remains
license that's awarded.
it remains an annual permitting process.
Okay.
That is not changing.
But let me just be clear for everybody here, including the community. If we pass this resolution tonight, that will be the annual process, will it?
No, this is only under extraordinary circumstances would you allow this expansion.
To continue.
Well, next year,
This is the key.
well, we don't know. There's not extraordinary
There are
circumstances.
two pieces that jump out for me. It's one, that the adjacent business order yearly has to provide their agreement to allow that expansion. And this is 0.7 of 3.2.7, so it's in addition to the existing set of rules. So in addition to the existing set of rules, in extraordinary circumstances, assuming that the owner beside you writes you another letter every year saying you're allowed to do it, then in all of those, there's quite a lot of
So
gates to
Yeah.
prevent this
On
from being
that
open.
note-
Subject to the approval of the director.
Yeah,
Like that's.
I'm with you, but on that note, we have adjacent owners in the past that wanted different patios than we have today. Because this is not about the adjacent owner or the owner of the patio. This is about the greater good of the community. So if, what I'm hearing then is that the adjacent owner said, oh, I like it the way it is, we would retain it. Is that what I'm hearing?
No,
no,
Our existing rules state are not getting eliminated. We probably should have had 3.2 and 3.21 or whatever ones that we're saying despite that.
So, yeah, so essentially the only change is that, so currently the bylaw allows for, let's use back rows as an example, because their patio is not occupying an on-street parking. They're in the amenity space. Currently, the bylaw, without these changes that we're proposing tonight, would allow them to expand in front of the adjacent business owner if, one, they would get permission from the business owner on a yearly basis, and two, as long as they're not occupying on-street parking and additional on-street parking. What is essentially changing here is that because of COVID, we're considering having them expand onto an adjacent parking stall. But the first thing we need is the adjacent property owner to say yes. And also, the permit is valid from, well, let's say from May 1st to October 31st. So come next year in 2021, if everything's back to normal, there's no extraordinary circumstances, there's no reason for us to grant approval to exceed what is considered in 3.21 and 3.23, which is one angled parking stall, three angled or one parallel. So essentially that's how it works. So there's certain flexibility with the director, which we often use in various bylaw.
Okay, thank you. That's good. I feel better now.
no, good question.
Councillor Lockenberg? No, we have one more speaker.
Yeah, Sebastian, when you talk to some of these owners, because this seems like this would be a fairly significant investment to, expand your decks, buy additional chairs and tables and so on. I think to echo what the mayor's saying, I think communication is going to be really important here, because if I'm making that investment as a business, I'm going to want to be super clear that this is a one-year thing, maybe into next summer.
Yeah, that's a good point, Councillor, and we are very clear. And I think the model that we're proposing is, anyways, the few ones that we've talked to so far are going to use picnic tables, and are going to do some sort of a wood barrier on some sort of a concrete footing, so nothing permanent, so that it can easily be removed. So it will still look good and clean, but it just won't be some of the permanent ones that we see where they build a platform and extend onto the patio and have awnings and all those things. So they're very well aware that these will be temporary in nature. They're happy with that because a lot of them don't have maybe the capital to invest in a significant structure. And also they're very happy that the fees have been waived to help them move on with that, and just to kind of create a bit more income for them, and try to catch up, and also try to encourage people to come out during the summer. Yeah, but yeah, they're very aware that it is a temporary thing, and we'll make sure that nobody's doing something very extravagant and expanding because for those reasons.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the way I've saw this is just, you're just taking square footage from inside of a restaurant that normally you could just fill, and you're placing it outside because people feel more comfortable outside these days. So I think you're just helping restaurants build capacity outside. That's really I think that's the direction this is going. If I'm correct.
Yeah, no, that's correct. And also, patios are fairly busy in the summer, so I think if we look beyond that, it's also an opportunity to bring people out to the downtown, and potentially some spin-off to other businesses that aren't restaurants. So by having more people come out, hopefully we'll make sure that our downtown stays dynamic and viable for these challenging times. Yeah, so that's part of it too.
And safe.
And
Okay.
safe, of course.
Thank you. So our first, we have a mover and a seconder for number 1. All in favor? Carried, thank you. And the council passed third reading of the Sidewalk Cafe Amendment number 3501, 2020. Councillor Page and Councillor Morrison, all in favor? Thank you. Council finally adopted Sidewalk Cafe Amendment number 3501, 2020, pursuant to the powers granted to council by the Ministry Order number M139. Moved by Councillor Lochtenberg and second by Councillor Anderson. All in favor? Carried. Thanks very much. Thanks, Sebastian.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Lake Street Road closure. We dealt with this earlier on in this year. Council on May the 4th, and below is a recommendation to move this forward. And the number 1 is that Lake Street, if council's okay with this, Lake Street Road closure bylaw number 3499 2020 be read a first time and a second time by title only. Councillor Renwick and Councillor Woodward. Questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Thank you. And number 2, that Lake Street closure bylaw number 3499 2020 be read a third time by title only. Moved by Councillor Councillor Lochtenberg, second by Councillor Renwick. Questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Thanks very much. Next is a zoning amendment. This is an interesting one. Development Service is proposing an amendment to the zoning bylaw to address a number of housekeeping amendments. Conditional permission to illuminate building facades, more nuisance, definition of secondary, that's not nuisance, that's nuance. The definition of secondary suites ready and clear, more restrictive regulations on portable vehicle shelters, shipping containers, and accompanying amendment to bylaw number enforcement bylaw. To bylaw notice enforcement bylaw is proposed for the, consistency with the zoning bylaw with respect to the portable vehicle shelters. I've read that several times in the last 3 days, and
A lot of,
there's a lot
It's
of
a
different
mouthful.
words in there.
mouthful.
What happens when you do your master's?
Sorry.
Gotta talk to the guys that are writing all this stuff. Anyway, that's what's in front of us at the moment, more or less, and this is quite an extensive report with a lot of good information in it. And there are 4 recommendations here, but I think we have an opportunity for you to give us a few ideas.
Absolutely.
A little bit of background.
For sure. As the mayor read in the introduction, there's quite a few amendments here. Sort of the background on these for the public's interest is that, over the course of a year, we did a similar sort of minor and housekeeping amendment bylaw just over a year ago, I believe. We collect various sort of tidbits here and there of issues with the zoning bylaw that arise, based on a complaint or other issues through an application that don't quite make sense or where there's a need to adjust a definition and that kind of thing. Other oversights that have occurred over time, and this is the product of that. Now, there's a few additional sort of projects that are included in this amending bylaw as well too, that are a bit more of interest, which were listed off by the mayor just now. I think, just to leave some time for questions, I think I would just draw attention then specifically to those what's currently called temporary shelters, which we're proposing to change to call them a portable vehicle shelter, as most city zoning bylaws define a temporary shelter as a temporary homeless shelter. Perhaps the main, other than a new definition that's a bit more nuanced, that restricts their size to 23 square meters and 1 story, is to require that these sort of garage in a box, sort of canvas car shelters, as you wish to call them, are required to be maintained in good condition and working order, which is one of the main complaints that arise with these, is that oftentimes, although they can be maintained and they can be well kept, it can happen that they're not. So this is then proposing to introduce into the bylaw that that going forward they have to be maintained in good condition, otherwise it's a non-compliant use. Accompanying that is this amendment to the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw, which basically means that we would then also have the option to issue a bylaw ticket in the case of a portable vehicle shelter that otherwise meets the setbacks, otherwise meets the rules, but is not being maintained in a good condition. That's not currently something that we have the ability to do right now. The second area then, just to draw council and the public's attention to, is this question of shipping containers. We have had this on our work plan in various forms many times over the past years. From the fire bylaw addresses this as well, and from their department, we've recently done up a handout for shipping containers. And there's continually more and more inquiries about these. There are still regulations that ensure the basic safety of them. Of course, the fire department has to inspect them. They have to be properly ventilated. But here it's being proposed that in residential areas that they not be permitted except on a temporary basis. So not permitted as a storage container, that kind of thing, for reasons explained in this report. And then imposing certain restrictions to contain these containers in a way, if you will, in commercial industrial zones as well too. So to keep them at a minimum setback from any adjacent residential zones, for example, to make it more explicit that they can't take up required parking spaces, to require them not be in the front yard unless they're temporary. Sure. And only one per lot, as well as to require that they be cladded in building materials, so as to not just appear as a metal box. So I'll leave it at that. Questions?
May I have a question? I have a question about that.
Okay, we should probably put this on the floor to get formalized, if that's okay with you.
Well, there's a lot more things to go over,
I know
and
there is, yeah. There's
yeah,
a lot
but
to be-
and the only thing is we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, no,
We have
1,
two
2,
on
3
temporary,
separate things, and
yeah,
so I just
three,
don't know where this fits. To be honest with you, I don't
Could
know.
we just move one for the moment for discussion?
Sure.
Well, 1 and 2, temporary shelters in both of those, 1 and
Well,
2.
we'll just move
Okay.
one and
Yeah,
we can
okay.
talk about.
Yes. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, it's after.
Councillor Page,
Moved.
second. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah.
Councillor
So
Anderson.
my question with the shipping containers is that they must not be sited in the front yard, and I was just thinking about the shipping container at the Leafs that's doing the oil collection, and what.
Sorry.
And I just wanted to, we've put that there. It serves our community, and just what the implications are, if it's grandfathered in, how all of that works.
So it is legally existing there. So therefore it may continue to be there. I know that they're going to have to return to council soon anyway to renew that. So that would be part of that conversation at the time, and as a site-specific consideration, like all of zoning bylaw regulations, there are certainly cases where if they apply to 95% of the lots, there's going to be that still leaves dozens of lots where they don't always make sense. That could be one of them, but as a general rule, to not have them sort of front and center when you're driving along the street.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Page.
I just
And then Councillor Woodward.
Just in a little bit of a side, I was chuckling because I was down at Cottonwood or before council today, and I nearly got hit as someone popped out around that particular shipping container. So it's just relevant.
They're waiting for you, are they?
They're just tucking around that spot there. My question is, of course, as earlier, around the lighting component to this for the facade lighting. I like the idea of bringing some ability to do some ambience on some of the frontage here. But I am wondering, given kind of a passion here to improve the lighting condition of the downtown, if we want to pull out or ask staff for some additional work to be done around a corporate-wide or city-wide lighting policy to restrict our use of anything over 3,000 K in our light bulb pieces. And if so be, I would actually want to put an amendment or a sixth point on the end asking staff to do some work around a lighting policy.
I'd suggest you add that to your list of policies they're looking at, and just decide where that fits in terms of their work plan. So I think there was a good suggestion. We can bring that back quarterly and those
Yeah, could we do that?
those new ones that, well, you needed somebody else to support you on adding that to the list.
I think we learned earlier we don't need a secretary.
So maybe at the end of this, we could
Yeah,
see if
when we
you
get through this, maybe have a crack
get
at
some
that.
support.
I would like
look
to
at
just
lighting.
move that we put this to a quarterly session.
Oh, not this one.
No,
The facade, just the idea of a lighting policy be reviewed at a
so
quarterly.
leave that for a separate.
Yeah.
So as soon as we're done this, Councillor Page, you can throw that on there.
Sure.
Okay, Councillor Woodward was next, then
Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Lockenberg, then Councillor Anderson.
I just wanted to get a point of clarification. I was looking through this. I mean, there's a bunch of things about shipping containers, but I know shipping containers, as many people here know, are being used as building, people are building houses out of them. And in many ways, they are, there's many of them in the world, and they are super strong, and they have a lot of benefits. Just wondering, would that be allowed ever to be used as a building material?
Not as of right. So under these regulations, there's certainly a lot of debate around shipping containers. There are various individuals of the city who are pro, who think that they're great, and others who don't think that they're great, even when they're converted. But they would require a variance then on a case by case basis.
Thank you.
Councillor Renwick, and then.
Wait,
sorry,
no,
was there
it's
Councillor
him,
Lockenberg?
me, and then.
Sorry. Councillor Lockenberg, Anderson, and Renwick.
I was gonna,
Dennis, are you in on this?
Oh, no,
Okay.
he had my question, so.
Okay.
yeah, Councillor Woodward, I talked to Sam about the shipping containers. He's definitely got some opinions on that. Alex, can you explain to me I want to ask about the lighting first. Where did that come from? Like, what's the motivation for doing that? Like, I don't like the idea of upward facing lights at all. Like, I think that we do need to consider our dark sky and really kind of continue to protect that. So
Yep.
has this been a common request?
I don't think it's been a common request. I think they didn't come directly to me, but I can think of a couple examples of buildings, sort of heritage buildings along Baker Street, that have been inquiring about facade lighting. It's and to those concerns around dark side, that's why it's sort of worded the way it is. It is possible to have lights that aren't shining down, that they're still dark sky compliant based on the angle that they're at, so they're not lighting up the sky. I did quite a bit of research into what other cities have, going from like smaller to larger, like from Nanaimo to Toronto on their lighting policies. It is quite common to allow facade lighting, as is proposed here, with the maximum color temperature, ensuring that they're properly angled, and that they're serving a particular purpose. So it's certainly a question of aesthetics. We talked quite a lot about this, and came to the conclusion to recommend in favor of this, because there can be great benefits to sort of highlighting at all times of the day and night certain features of a building, and it can be done properly. It can be done properly as well too. So it's proposed then as a conditional allowance, right? That it does have to. There is some discretion on the part of the director to ensure that it's respecting all of the criteria that are listed in the bylaw. And of course, if the director did not feel that an application met that, then it would be denied, and that person could ultimately come to council as well too. So there's a lot of precedence for allowing it, but it is certainly a matter of taste at the end of the day.
Great. And there's just a follow up on that. The second one was related to the temporary vehicle shelters. You were saying that they had to have sort of building material. They can't just be the plastic or the metal sheeting, but they had to be sort of built with. Was that like to?
No.
Shipping container.
Oh, that was
Yes.
the shipping
Yes.
container.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So the cladding on shipping containers. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Then thank you.
Yeah, so my other question is about the prohibition on trucks over 4,000 kilograms. So they're currently prohibited, I guess, from parking anywhere in the city, and it's proposed to allow them in all zones except residential. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit, please?
For sure. So there's in the last year, there's been a complaint in one residential neighborhood of numerous trucks sort of living up on a residentially zoned lot, and being in that neighborhood on a regular basis, on a daily basis. And that was sort of the inspiration, if you will, for us to kind of take a closer look at this clause that we don't usually have to look at. You know, we're following up on that bylaw complaint still, but we did. It was brought up actually by Nelson Police when they were asked to look into it. Well, in that case, they're prohibited everywhere, so should we be going up and down Lakeside Drive as well too, and issuing tickets to take away all of the delivery trucks out of the city of Nelson.
Or dump trucks.
Yeah. So I wish I knew more about how that clause got worded at some point, but it does just prohibit them pretty much everywhere. So.
Okay. Yeah. No. I mean, obviously, we need trucks over 400 kilos to be able to deliver things. It sounds like a good direction. My other question is, and I do know about the complaint that's been made. I understand the frustration of the neighbors. I also do know that there are other small businesses in town that have a vehicle very similar to the one that you've shown that's used for, I think, food preparation, and they have a fairly large residential property. They park it, I think they have a garage that it goes into, and I'm just wondering about cases like that, if there's going to ever be, so first of all, that where there's, people have basically a home-based business and have been using this as a key component of their business, and that's supposed to be that the food, I think, goes directly into that vehicle, and it would be, for them to never be able to park there, it would have, I think, pretty severe impacts on a business that's been around for a long time. The other thing that it made me think of is, what about recreational vehicles? A significant amount of them are over 400 kilos, and they're not trucks, but I don't see the definition for trucks, so I don't know if it's trucks or vehicles. And if people have them, currently parked, where they're allowed, if there's a difference for that. Sorry, 4,000 kilos.
Yeah.
4,000. Yes, obviously. Sorry.
Yeah. Those are both sort of good points. On the recreational, to go from last to first, on the recreational vehicle front, we kind of approach it from a backward sort of reverse sort of logical way of saying, well, that they are permitted on any residential lot, one per lot, and that therefore we're kind of seeing this as sort of a separate section addressing something else. To be fair, though, that is a good point. That it does say vehicles in excess of that weight then are not permitted. So it could be a good idea then to actually amend that to exempt recreational vehicles as otherwise permitted by the bylaw, which is a maximum one per lot. I think that would be a good idea to do. On the home-based business front, I'm not personally aware of home-based businesses in the city having trucks larger than that. I can think of some that I've seen around that are slightly smaller than that size, like more like a food truck, for example.
At least my understanding, I don't really understand. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I don't, for me, how much does a truck weigh? I mean, I just said 400 pounds 3 times. It's obviously not, it's 4,000 kilograms. But just talking to my partner, he was like, yeah, none of the sort of normal work trucks that you're going to see around town, but I'm pretty sure there's at least 2 or 3 food trucks that I can think of that, and at least one of them I know parks in a residential neighborhood.
Yeah. My understanding, I also had to look into what vehicles weigh for this, is that food trucks would be okay.
Okay.
But I'm not a mechanical expert, and of course I'm sure it varies from food truck as well too. There's some that are exceptionally large, and the equipment in there as well. It is gross vehicle weight, so I do think I'm pretty confident that a food truck the gross vehicle weight of a food truck would fall under 4,000 kg.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's great.
So the thought was less around resident, because currently. I admit we didn't consider too much of those cases because currently we're sort of stepping away from an existing prohibition. Right now it's nowhere in the city, and we're just thinking about the commercial areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Burnham.
Alex, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Very good. Here's my fear about shipping containers, and I have a little experience with shipping containers. My former business, I bought a few and what have you, but where will they be allowed in the city? Like Railtown?
Yes.
Okay, so here's my fear is somebody wants to do something with shipping, maybe they wanna do a storage, facility, with shipping containers. Well, there's nice looking shipping containers, and then there's dog patch looking shipping containers. So are we covered here
Yeah.
in, they must be clad in building material color?
Yeah.
Because, you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Yeah.
They're rusty, some are blue, some are orange, some are no, right? And it would be awful.
Yeah.
What would,
Yes. So, so to clarify, then, first of all, in terms of the possibility of having a storage center, this limits them to one per lot. So unless it were a property that was subdivided and composed of several lots, and they worked around it that way, that wouldn't be permitted without a variance. And then yes, the cladding would be required on any shipping container that's not a temporary building. So what temporary is defined elsewhere is up to a year. So there's some of these restrictions here are relaxed when it's a temporary building for temporary usage. But if it's going to be there for more than a year, yes.
there's a few places I think of in some of the alleys in Nelson that if a business wanted some extra storage,
Mm-hmm.
that they could put a container back there.
Mm-hmm.
And quite honestly, for a business, they make a lot of sense because you can't build per square foot, you can't build anywhere close to the cost of a shipping container.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I don't wanna cut that off, but I want it to look
Mm-hmm.
good.
So these should address that. And just speaking from the practical experience of having a lot of inquiries of around shipping containers coming in, is that you see there's a few that have been around for a few years, but in terms of recent ones, most people they ask and we never hear from them again. Because yes, just simply buying the shipping container and even having it delivered is pretty cheap, but even what's already required in terms of citing it properly, in terms of what the fire department requires for ventilation, that kind of thing. I can't speak to the economics of all of it. Yeah, but they don't come back. So, yeah.
Any further speakers? Okay, I got a couple of questions and a couple of things I'd like to mention to you. On the trucks that park, as an example, on Lakeside Drive, many of the folks that are driving trucks nowadays are contractors. That's their home, that's their office. They don't have a yard. It's not like it was 20 years ago where everything went to a fleet center. And I'm just a little concerned that we might, I can understand the residential piece, but Kevin just mentioned Lakeside Drive as an example. Not suggesting that people should have carte blanche to, park as long as they want at Lakeside Drive.
You just mean like along the airstrip there?
Yeah, along the airstrip or whatever. But I think, based on where we're at the moment, Alex, I just concerns me a little bit that we're taking on an issue that I think definitely needs to be addressed. Probably should have been addressed long ago, but maybe we need to be cautious at this point in time.
Yeah.
Because some of those people, what we're talking about here tonight, could be the difference in them going to work or not in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
If you understand.
Clarify, right now, they're not allowed.
Right,
This is allowing.
right. So we got to make sure that we're catering to those folks as we go forward. So this is really important.
And if I could also jump in there too, just quickly, that this is only addressing on properties, right, on lots. So like literally on the street, for example, or on any street, that's covered by the traffic bylaw, which is a completely separate set of
And then
regulations.
second thing is, and I talked to Pamela a bit about it today, is the portable shelters or the vehicle shelters that have sprung up in the last 10 years roughly, seem to be catching on. And I understand what you're saying about regulating setbacks, etc. But I'm not so sure, based on some of our conversations tonight around the look of our community, density, green space, etc., etc. If we're going in the right direction of allowing people like myself maybe to spend $500 at, say, Canadian Tire, buy a plastic shelter, put it on your property, and we're condoning that. Many of them are not maintained properly. Many of them have flammable liquids in them. some of them, most of them that I've seen in the community are actually on city property. And some of them have morphed from beyond even a framed $500 canopy
Yep.
to a galvanized roof, etc. And when those things fall apart after 5 or 6 years, we're dealing with them at the transfer station. They're we've had the plastic bag campaign, you name it. And I'm not so sure that we shouldn't be looking at another way to incentivize people to cover their car other than with a propped up $500 unit from China that gets thrown in our landfill in a number of years. I know in my case, when I wanted to close in my carport to a garage, I had to get a building permit to do it. So, I'm concerned about the growth of that particular, and Councillor Anderson, I don't know.
Yeah, no, and actually, just as you were speaking about that, it made me think of them also as a safety hazard. Recently, I know one that blew up into the overhead, like hydro lines, through, and then passed like into like another property. And so I would it was the same property, but like another area of the property. And it had also had like a reinforced metal roof, but it was originally that, there were sandbags on it, but this was in a storm. We ended up there was an electrical issue. There was this huge safety issue. There's the aesthetics issue. Like, they are convenient, and I understand the sort of desire. It's a really quick way to get your things covered, but there's more, I think, issues than there are sort of bonuses to them.
Yeah, I think where I'm going here, Alex, but it's not for me, it's for council. But where I'm going is that we spend a lot of quality time with people that request variance for carports and garages and laneway access to the properties. And we work closely with them to make sure that they're compliant, but you can buy these things and throw them up in the exact same place that you could turn down for a carport.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying? And I think we're heading the wrong direction here. Just so you know, that's where I'm coming from. Councillor Lockenberg.
I would totally agree with the mayor on this one. I think that they're definitely taking us in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what to recommend. Do we amend this to ask it to go back to staff for reconsideration, or what? But I think I'd like to. I'd like to
clarify what these are right now. So right now they are allowed.
They're allowed, and from what I understand,
And they have to be within setbacks, similar to a garage or whatever. The only thing we did add was, you have to keep them in good repair. So you can certainly ban them. That will take a fair amount of work to kind of haul them off people's properties. And, we did change this a number of years ago to get what we did with it. I think that's when we added the setbacks and things like that. And as the mayor pointed out, it's running around the city trying to manage these things is not the easiest. They're half of the garages built in Nelson are on our property as well, sheds or things like that. It's a tough one. So I think, if you want to ban them, then it will be, I think, a fair amount of work to get people into compliance.
And on that compliance question too, like, to remember, like, it is, as long as they're meeting the rules currently, they would be, an existing one would be considered existing non-conforming. So, a case of one of these vehicle shelters right now that's out there, some of them are certainly on the right of way, or they don't meet the setbacks. Those are non-conforming, and yes, we could go in and enforce and remove them. But in any example of a vehicle shelter that is currently up and it meets the setbacks, it's generally 1.5 meters from other lot lines, it could stay theoretically for forever, right? Theoretically, it would maintain existing nonconformity. So we can't go back. There's the ones on the right of ways, we can get rid of them, but we can only go back so far for existing ones.
So is there anything here that's critical that we pass tonight, or if that's shelters that these temporary shelters, I guess we just wouldn't approve any new ones. I think we'd still want to have.
I think, excuse me, Kevin, but I think it's been my observation, and I've been here for over 40 years. I highly doubt that we've approved any of them.
You didn't
may
have to.
No,
approve
we didn't have to.
You didn't have to.
Yeah.
Exactly,
So
so,
we're allowed.
yeah, so I think it's a mistake to give anybody the impression that we have approved anything that's out there currently.
Sorry, but they're not, they don't require a permit. So they're legal if they meet the setbacks.
Right.
And there's only one per lot. It's not, because it's not a building, we don't issue a building permit for it. So yeah, we never, it's the same in most municipalities that do allow them, is that just by virtue of meeting the setbacks, they're legal.
So for a question before Councillor Page, if I wanted to build a shed in my backyard, what's the maximum size I could build it before I need a permit?
Generally 10 by 10. Mm-hmm.
You understand where I'm going here?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my solution to that is run over to Canadian Tire and buy a temporary shelter 3 times as long and put it in the same place. Councillor Page.
Yeah, my question around this, there's a lot of good stuff in here. I think, you know, there's some of these out here and they might be worth bringing out or picking out and doing something else with, but do we have the ability to require some sort of permitting that would require an annual renewal? Is there any levers we could be using to ask people to come to us and get a license for these and then set a price that's appropriate to?
Mm-hmm. There's, I think there's because it's on private property, there might be some other legalities at play. There is one example, I only saw one of that kind of system in Timmins, Ontario. We're not able to issue a building permit for it because it doesn't fall under the building code. It's not a building. So you can't go that route. But Timmins, they have essentially that they have a separate standalone bylaw that's like the portable vehicle shelter bylaw that sets these things and sets a permit fee. I think as staff, we would be concerned about the added, you know, how much we could actually charge for that, you know, $50, $100. It's perhaps it does add another sort of layer of complications for sure that may not be able to be paid back. Like, and going for enforcement would seem certainly reasonable if council wanted to direct staff to be more, you know, proactive in enforcing on portable vehicle shelter regulations. But I don't know if all of the added system that would come, you know, through a licensing system that charges $50 a year, for example. I'm not sure if that would be worth our while.
Yeah, just to be clear that you can, on fees, you can recover costs. You can't charge a premium to, you know, incent one thing or the other with fees. So it would be your staff time to, you know, enforce those. And, you know, if we do want to, well, again, we're open. We're not hung up on portable shelters. They are, you know, they're a beast out there to try to chase them down. And are they on setbacks or not? Because they're much easier. They're not permanent. So if you put them where they're not supposed to be, it's much easier than building a building where it's not supposed to be.
Well, that's the ironic thing about it. It's a temporary shelter, and I can recall when they first
Oh, right, they were supposed
people actually took them apart
That was
in the spring and put them
regulation,
back
yeah.
up together. You know,
Yeah.
that was the deal. It was there to keep your car clear of snow in the wintertime. But now they've become a shed,
Yeah,
and quite happy to drive around town with you and point some of them out. There are actual sheds with canoes in them and gas and lawnmowers and snow blowers. So, Councillor Page.
Well, just picking up on that, can we require that? Like, I really feel for the people who want to use this to protect and keep the snow off and all those various reasons and temporary, but maybe if there was more work that had to be done, taking them down and putting them up and taking them down and putting them up, that would be more of an incentive to do something a little bit more permanent.
and we tried that.
But it's just chasing them down.
Yeah, how do you run around the city, make sure
It's
everybody's taking them
enforcement
up?
again, you know,
Yeah.
it's a challenge, right?
So we can, if
I'm
you,
here, though, there with this one.
if you guys want us to sort of look at not allowing these, then we can have that look at that, right? So this, you know, passing this today would at least put some standards around the current ones that they have to be at least maintained, and that would give them some time to look into whether we want to not allow any future ones to be built. So then you're only dealing with the existing ones.
I just.
So I just have
Thank you.
a process
Councillor
question.
Renwick has a question.
I would like if staff could go back and I would also be curious to know what it would take just to say, yeah, no more. There are no more. You've got one now, good for you.
Yeah.
And, count your lucky stars, but there are no more. I have a bit of a problem with these in that, you know, there are people out there that take a lot of pride in their properties and their homes and what have you. And then the guy next door doesn't so much, and then the next thing you know, he's got one of those propped up with, like you say, full of stuff, and then 3 years later, you know, the cover's gone off it and the frame, it's unsightly, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes more of an enforcement issue.
I can tell you in terms of what it takes to ban them, it would take about 5 minutes of writing. It's just a matter of council's decision, right?
Yeah, if that's the preference, then we can
Yeah.
change that
Excuse me,
bylaw.
Councillor Woodward. Pam, did you have something you wanted to add to the conversation? You should come up, please, if you don't mind.
You know, as we discussed earlier, I don't have any issue with banning them. My only point is, they don't require a permit, so we don't know about them. And so if you're gonna ban them, how are you gonna know whether the one that this fellow put up and is grandfathered, or he put up after we passed this? Like, I just don't know how we go out and do this. That's my only concern on this.
Good, Councillor Woodward was next, and then, hey, I started a bigger conversation here that I think probably needed to be had, to be honest with you, in my opinion. And it's not a pushback on the quality of the report, if you understand where I'm going, but I think it's, you know, council has to feel comfortable that if they have questions, they should be able to ask them as well. So, Councillor Woodward, you're up.
I just want to look at them at an angle of the fire smart situation, which we're working really hard to try to fire smart our city. And these would just ignite like a book of matches. So, you know, there is that angle I think that you could look at. The other piece is that, as the mayor alluded to, they are temporary and they do wear out
I'm just wondering
fairly
if we should
quickly with
pass this
UV
and
radiation
we
from
come
the
back
sun.
with that other amendment.
And
There's a whole bunch of other things.
you know, I've seen people like just buy a huge tarp and just put another tarp over top of the old tarp, and I mean, it just, you know, it's not great. It's going down and they're so cheap now and they're so plentiful that I wish we could give incentive maybe to say, and you know, instead of putting one of those up, maybe we can incentivize actually putting up a super simple, you know, four pillar slant roof shelter. I'm just throwing it out there.
Can I just suggest, like, there's a bunch of other really good things in here.
Yeah.
Can we maybe pass this and then refer to relook at the
Wait,
whatever temporary
In terms
or
of a
the vehicle
process,
shelter?
sorry, in terms of a process question, I know, so wouldn't we, like, don't we pass it, then staff comes back for the third reading, but has the changes in there? Like, isn't there something that we can, they're able,
Have to hold this at second, and then we'd have to
yeah, so can we
get
just
back
hold it at
again for
second?
third, and then we'd have to go to adoption, so you're gonna delay it a month.
Yeah,
Just chomping at the bit here for a sec, and I just think this is kind of a new. We've kind of talked about before. We've heard it from the mayor before, and I think it's a good piece. But maybe this is just another thing we want to have a discussion about around new initiatives and whether or not we want to pursue this or not. A little bit more around the best practices. Like I think we're asking for more structure within this. A lot of work has already been done here. Let's let development services move forward with that work, and then if we want to have a discussion in 2 or 3 months about a bunch of new things, temporary shelters can be one of those discussions of whether we want to ban or not ban or how we'll enforce it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the practical piece Pam identified. We would have to go out and document all of these existing.
Well, that's my question, I guess, is that is the grandfather component, like they last 3-5 years or something like that. So there is a turnover. So as far as the grandfathering goes, you know, I mean, you wouldn't be able to grandfather the space. Like I've always had one here, so therefore I got it.
I think you could reskin it.
You could reskin it, I guess. Yeah. But it seems to me that this is an issue related to fire smarting, that there's a lot of factors here, and whatever goes inside of that, if that thing's ready to go, it's going to take everything with it.
Yeah.
And it's going to blow. Like,
Yeah.
not only is it going to light, it's going to take this flaming pile of debris all over the neighborhood. So If we're gonna take fire smarting seriously,
I think we're kind of making it up as we go here.
It's a large land.
I gotta say, we're saying that, but I don't think, no one's gone outside and lit one on fire to see what it does, so
Well,
you might wanna ask the fire department what will
I
happen.
may
Okay,
have.
Councillor Anderson, you haven't had a shot yet, Councillor Morris, so
No, I
you go
haven't.
ahead.
So-
then.
I am so, I'm just sorry, my apologies, Mayor. I am paying attention, but I'm a little bit lost here on, we seem to be talking a lot about the portable vehicle shelters. And I'm unclear as, can we just not have a motion that says that we ban them? Like, I'm just kind of, am I missing something here? Can we not do like 4 and 5? Like, could we pass 1, 2, and 3 and refer 4 and 5 and have it come back as being banned? And the thing I want to talk about, like, I understand and I hear the manager of development services addressing this issue, but I can clearly recall when we banned burning outdoors in the city of Nelson, and being in, and this is just an example because I think we must have sent notices out somehow, but I can remember being in Canada Tire in Castlegar, walking up and down the aisles, and I saw where they sold the chimeneas, which, because they don't protect from ash fallout, so that they are banned in the city of Nelson. Like, that I have one in my backyard is like, you know, I guess I could have one in my backyard. I don't think anybody's going to come and look. But it said there, these are not, by bylaw, are not allowed in the city of Nelson. So, like, is there not ways that we engage with our community stores and shopping areas to then have a notice to say that, you know, these kinds of things doesn't preclude that somebody isn't going to go and buy one somewhere and put it up. But I mean, in terms of the enforcement bit, because I get that. It's like, you buy it, you put it up, and it's like, oh yeah, well no, I've had this here for 10 years. It's not new, but I just remember that. I mean, I saw a sign in the store that said, these aren't,
Yeah, who would wanna deal with the returns? Right, which is what would happen.
you know, you're not supposed to use this in the city of
So are
Nelson.
you suggesting are you making an amendment?
Well, I'd like to know, like, so I'm confused here about whether or not somehow, are the portable vehicle shelters only referred to in recommendations 4 and 5?
They're referred to in the zoning number 1 and 2 as well. In the zoning, the actual regulations
Okay,
are all
that's what I
contained in
thought.
the
So it's
zoning.
in all of them.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I suppose I think council can move to just adopt resolution number 1 for first and second reading, and then direct us to make amendments prior to third reading.
Yeah.
And I imagine we could also come back perhaps with the resolution around consideration of enforcement as well too, if that's the direction that wants to be taken, because I think there are certainly many options around going forward with enforcement. But
Yeah, because I just kind of feel like we're going around the table. I'd like to get something moved if we can start, and then,
I'll
So
second
we
that.
have a motion on the table, so we have to defeat
I'll
that.
second. Oh,
Well, you can
I
go,
think we can call
you
the
can do,
question.
we're still in questions.
you can do first and second reading.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
staff can
I think
look
that was
at
the
it
only one
again.
that we had moved for discussion, so.
Just Alex, I don't know if you have notes on everything that we had questions about. So it was
I
the
think so.
vehicles and then
Yep.
the temporary shelters.
Yep, the recreational vehicles and the vehicle
We have
weight.
a mover
Yeah.
and a seconder for number 1, and I'm going to call the question on that. All in favor? Carried.
And then I'd like to refer 2, 3, 4, and 5 back to staff.
I'll second
Well, you
that.
just don't have to,
You don't have to do anything with them?
you just don't,
Okay.
yeah, you just
Yeah.
don't pass them.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, you could do how about the bylaw enforcement?
Well, if we're going to
Say
come
anything?
back and just
Yeah, we
That's
have to,
just
ban
for
them,
portable?
we'll have to change that as well
That's just
too.
for portable vehicles?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
but but wait, could we do 4 and 5 though? Because if there's already unsightly ones, we'll still, even if they're grandfathered in, we still want to,
Yeah,
anything
I
that's
think we
unsightly,
could pass this and, sorry.
anything that's
Yeah.
unsightly, we should still be able to,
you could do 4 and 5.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure, or for sure 4, and maybe because we might want to take a look at that a bit closer, and I don't want to commit to
Okay.
maybe the wording
Fair
as is for right now, but maybe 4.
Okay,
I'll
number
move
4 then.
4.
I'll second it.
Moved and second, all in favor? Carried. Thanks very much, Alex.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks.
Thanks.
That was a
That gives me a
marathon.
bit of time to take down the shelters I have in my backyard.
Oh, well, now we have Alex number 2 coming up here. We
Ideally,
now,
can I just add in my amendment or my motion?
Sorry?
for the dark sky. The
Oh,
lighting.
very good, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to move that council direct staff to perform a quick best practice scan of municipal lighting policies that enshrines the dark sky principles, public health, and outlines appropriate limits on color temperature and maximum looms, and report back to council at its next quarterly update.
I would suggest you refer that to the quarterly update, and then we would, then we'd say, here's all the things that you have, here's what's in play, here's the new ones you wanna add, and then at least you have the full package. Do we wanna move on this one, or do we wanna move on that one?
And so,
'Cause I think
would we
right now
want to do
we'd
that
have
with
to-
this? And like, we just had this whole discussion about portable shelters. I feel like both of those things should just
I
go
would
to the-
agree, but that's not what you chose. I think we'd probably have to hire a consultant to do that.
Okay, well, I'd like to move that we refer a discussion about a corporate lighting policy to.
Yeah.
our
Yeah, and
next
then you
up.
can just see where it fits. Because I don't think that's something we can do internally.
I think it is something we can do internally. So you're seconding it?
Could you,
Moved
excuse
and
me,
second.
Counselor, could you repeat that?
That council direct staff to refer, or, I'm not really sure how to word it now.
It's just, you lost his train of thought there, you had it right the first time.
The
No,
council-
yeah.
Yeah, oh, no, I'll just take the report out. So the council directs staff to perform a quick best practices scan of municipal lighting policies that enshrines the dark sky principles, public health, and outlines appropriate limits on color temperature and maximum looms, and refer it to our next, what are we calling
What are
those?
the update?
Okay, it's, like I said, that's challenging when you don't know what that's gonna displace. I don't know what Alex or Sebastian or somebody else is doing.
Add it to the agenda for the next quarterly update, as opposed to do the work.
Sure, yeah, no,
Yeah.
sure.
I just think you should know what you're gonna put off if you add this one to it.
So we want to change that to add it
Add
to
to the-
our next, add it to our agenda for our next quarterly update.
Sure.
That's a mover, a seconder, second by Councillor Luckman.
Yeah, and they can look at it and estimate how
Yeah,
much
I don't
time
need
it
you to
might take.
do a ton of, I
Yeah.
want a scan.
Thank you. Questions and comments? All in favor? Thanks very much. Okay, E-bike program. 2019 council initiated and indicated an interest in having a on-billing finance program for Nelson Hydro customers for e-bikes and pedal bikes, similar to the EcoSave loan program. On September 16th, council heard from staff and directs the staff to develop an e-bike program for 2020. Council is now presented with the e-bike loan business plan for approval and provided further direction to staff. So Alex can give us a little bit of background, and then if somebody's willing to move the staff recommendation, then we'd be happy to move forward with this. Moved by Councillor Page, second by Councillor Morrison. Alex.
Okay. Well, again, I'd like to say that our EcoSave program coordinator, Carmen Proctor, wanted to be here to present and take questions on this, but she's taken sick, so I'm in her place today. And you have the e-bike program, and I'm sure you've read it, so I won't reread it to you, but I'll just touch on 6 or 7 highlight points just to for the public record and to refresh what it's about. So we call it an e-bike program, but it is more than just e-bikes, it's pedal bikes as well. And bikes that could be used for active transportation, meaning that people, actively pedal their way up and down the hill instead of using their car. And that aligns with strategic plans for active transportation and greenhouse gas reductions, which is what the EcoSave program is all about, is reducing greenhouse gases. So you have the program plan in front of you. I just wanted to say we had discussed a little bit about rentals, meaning customers who are renting properties as opposed to owning their properties, which is the same issue that presented itself with the EcoSave loans. And we're not able to loan money unless people own the property themselves. So it's homeowners. So it's hard to do for logistical reasons. In terms of administering this program, the operational cost is very small. There's some admin costs for receiving applications and approving them and so on, but it's minuscule and just be absorbed in the EcoSave budget. The capital cost, which would be the funding pool which the loans would come from, is proposed to be part of the EcoSave funding pool, which is $500,000, and had been used quite a bit, but people have been paying off their loans, so there's, I think, about half of that money now available to be loaned out. And the program was designed to have a structure very similar to the EcoSave loans, which were basically characterized by very easy terms. There aren't a lot of hoops for people to go through to access the loan. And the last point I wanted to leave with you is that in the application, there's a survey people would have to fill out, and in that they would make a commitment, like a soft commitment, that they're going to use this bike to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, there's not going to be anybody running around checking to make sure they actually rode their bike on Wednesday, but we're asking them, you know, how many kilometers a year do you think you're going to save by not driving your car anymore? So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try and field them.
Councillor Lachtenberg.
Thank you, Alex. This is really exciting. Obviously, it's something we've been looking for almost a year now, and really excited to see it coming to this stage. You know, there's something we've talked about or asked about in the past, a small issue, but I think it's pretty important to not lose sight of, is that this could be an entry point into the EcoSave program in general for some people who haven't been thinking about, say, retrofitting their home. This gets them into the program. So I just want to remind you or encourage you to look at this as also an opportunity to introduce people to the bigger program. So you get your bike, that's pretty exciting, but hey, there's a lot of other opportunities to do your retrofitting, consider a heat pump, and so on. So just that this is part of a bigger program in which you can save money and particularly save money on transportation and heating.
Comfortable homes?
A comfortable home, all of that, and really stress all of the financial benefits of doing this program.
Yeah, I think you have a good point, because it becomes a contact point for a real life contact with a potentially more engaged customer.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Page and then Councillor Woodward. No, okay, Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. So, thank you, Alex. I'm just really excited about this program because there's been a huge surge in electric bike sales, especially actually COVID. Because of COVID, people are buying electric bikes like never before. A lot of bike lanes are going into cities. Bike infrastructure is happening. So I think this is it's really we're a very small town. It's a great model. So I think what I'm excited about is that if we can make this work smoothly and efficiently, we can just basically template this out to a much larger city. And you can imagine like a big city like Vancouver doing something like this would be pretty phenomenal. So it's really exciting and innovative, and again, it just makes me feel really proud to be working here in Nelson and doing this kind of work. So thank you for the work you've done on this.
Okay, well, it was vast majority Carmen's work, but I'll pass that on to her.
Please do. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
But I think what enables us to do specifically this portion of it is because of Nelson Hydro, right? So, I mean, but maybe another version of this could exist in other ways.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a pace.
Councillor Page.
Just get my notes back up here. Oh, so there's 2 points here that I wanna see when we bring this back to bylaw, and it's just having some experience, having used the staff program that we put in, the pilot we put together to get our e-bike, and one of them is ensuring that there's language in around there to, if these are going to be used on the street, that they're street legal, that they have appropriate lighting, front and back, and whatever is required, because some of that sometimes doesn't get costed into that initial purchase. And I think if you're using this programming, leveraging it, it should be something that has all the appropriate street safety features including helmets or building some sort of incentive or sign off or waiver if people are not in fact getting that as part of their purchase.
So I guess I'm wondering a little bit, like, the thing is, you can buy a bike without lights right now, and that's legal.
Do we want to be encouraging through funding and financing that people are getting vehicles that will be on roads that don't have front and back lighting?
I think we could allow the loan to cover that. I don't know if we could force you to have it.
Right.
Okay, well, I think we should push it as far as we find reasonable. I just want to make sure that there's some specific language and people realize they're either opting in or out of doing that kind of stuff. And that when people are going into with this loan in hand, that the vendors are like, you know, we really want to see lights on this thing.
I think Councillor Page is he's on the right track here, because if we're going to be asking the community to use shared roads between motor vehicles and cyclists, you know, it's really important that we're not driving down Nelson Avenue or 3rd Street at 10 o'clock at night and there's a guy on a bike with no lights. And that's a common sight, you know. So if we're going to be financing these particular bicycles, we should make sure that they're compliant. You know, we don't have to dictate it within the number, but we should require that they have proper safety features attached to them. People should wear helmets. They should have lights, just like a car has lights, taillights and headlights.
Seatbelts and lights.
Share the roads, yeah, exactly.
And just a supplemental.
Yeah.
I know in town, property owners, this is targeted much to if you have a home already. I know property owners are already chomping at the bit waiting for this program. There are customers ready to go with this. I'd like to see some additional, and not necessarily in our bylaws, but some speaking to how we will reach out to those more vulnerable populations, the renters, not just the homeowners, and get these in the hands of those people who have less means to get access to this because they don't have a house that they can put a loan against. So however we can do to address that, I would like to hear more.
So I think, you know, that might be what you might call this is maybe a version 1.0 and maybe a 1.5, because I think, like, to pull the renters into the loan program, that's a huge lift. That's a long time.
Yeah,
there.
I don't want you to, I think we need to get something out sooner than later.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of the season, Pete. There is demand waiting for this. But I do want to see us start to work towards that 1.5 or that version 2 for everybody else.
And maybe that's working with community. I think Councillor Lautenberg talked about the cycling.
The West Kootenai Cycling Coalition.
Yeah, maybe it's, you know, how do you refurbish bikes? How do you, you know, make them safe? All those sorts of things that.
Well, in fact, if there is a purchase of a bike, chances are they're leaving they're upgrading a bike, so there's maybe going to be an additional bikes,
Yeah.
you know, used bikes coming into the market that.
Put a lawnmower motor on there.
Exactly.
That's how they
I
started.
don't know if that aligns with the safety part.
Quite,
Nor the eco part.
Go ahead.
Alex, just anticipating some of the criticism from a few people about the cost of the city on this. I just want to surface the fact that there is a fund already set aside for the EcoSafe program, which we'll be drawing from, and that currently, from what I understand from the CFO, we're getting about 0.6% on that money, and this is actually 3.5%, which is the financing rate, is a lift for the city. So this is actually, from a business perspective, this is good for the city too. So we're gonna do a little bit more with that. Do a little bit more with that money that's right now earning us 0.6%. So just to get that out there.
Yeah, I think, you know, that's a good point. It won't end up being a net cost, so.
Yeah.
So Alex, there's a couple of other things, and there's the shop local piece. Well, we have our own bike stores in town where we would encourage them to stimulate our own local economy with this. And secondly, it's for City of Nelson Hydro
That's right. So
customers only.
to qualify
be
for the
clear.
loan, they have to own a house and it has to be within the city of Nelson. Yeah.
Sorry, Jesse.
oh, right, well, that's okay.
He's moving.
Good hitchhike.
Hey, I wouldn't qualify for this either.
Okay, any further questions from Alex?
Yeah.
I'm the only one that qualifies.
And a mover and a seconder?
Yeah,
Oh, the mayor.
Yeah.
it was me and
Janice.
Yeah.
Janice.
Now,
And the
where'd
mayor.
Sarah go? She quit? You're in charge, okay. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, Alex. Good work.
Okay, thank you very much.
Alex,
I
and
like
thank you,
what
Carmen.
Councillor Lockenberg had to say about, I think it was you said about the contact point. And, you know, we did have an email from you this week about retrofitting and so forth, and that, I don't know if people realize the value there is to the whole economy in that retrofit piece, but it can be huge and have an incredible impact on the loss of energy out through roofs and walls and windows, and hopefully we could try and ramp that up. Now, the renovation business has been very strong the last month.
Can I just speak to a couple things for
Yeah, exactly.
a minute or so? So I think that's right, and of course, people who may be looking at commuting with their bike are probably of that mindset of, how can I do things with my house as well? So that they're the right audience, I think. So it should be very beneficial to the EcoSave program. But you talked about the renovations that are going on right now. We've been looking at the things we could do to capture that, with sort of the idea that, you know, some folks might be laid off and have lots of time to renovate their house or weather strip their house, or, you know, these kind of energy efficiency improvements. So we've had some discussions with Kevin about how we could do that. Anyways, Carmen drafted out a program, and just last week got advised, before she asked them if they could step up to the plate with some funding, and they said yes. So she's just on the verge of getting ready to roll this stuff out, because funding's in place, and an advertising campaign, and what, you know, it all kind of gels together, and then you launch it out the door. So
You could insulate those temporary shelters.
well, that's right. You could fiberglass it and foam
Spray
it.
foam.
Yeah.
Not phone.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank
Yeah.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, watch your
Watch
head.
out. Whoop.
Somebody just
He's
said,
a
watch
slow
out.
learner. Okay, thanks very much. So we're all good.
Great.
Okay, Fall Street land disposition. So council is being asked to approve a permanent closure of Fall Street Lane right of way along the east property line of 520 Fall Street in order to allow for a portion of the transfer to the Kootenai Christian Fellowship and consolidated with lot on 520 Fall Street.
I'll move that.
Okay, so we have two, okay, we have A and B here, and it's okay to put them together, Sarah? You okay with that?
Yes, those should be together.
Yeah, okay.
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Morrison. Any questions or comments? The project started, folks.
Yeah.
No turning back now. This is one of those closing the door after the horse is out of the barn. Anyway, thanks to Pam and her staff, and Kevin and Colin, everybody that worked closely with Kootenai Christian Fellowship to make this all happen. And
NBC Housing.
terrific project right on the corner coming into our city there. It's
Great.
Thanks, Sebastian, for your good work. It was great to have you down there the other day on the opening of that project. Thanks very much.
And that's 39 units of workforce housing.
Yeah, it's great.
Awesome.
And
Great.
a couple of the hoteliers have already comment on the value of having that place built as well. So it's good. Okay.
We still have to call the question still.
Yes, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Bike program, okay, all right. Next is Sebastian, you're up again, the active transportation primary bike route. Pursuant to section 131 of the Community Charter, Council is now asked to reconsider the May the 4th, 2020 motion that was passed relative to the design option for the bike route project. If the May 4th, 2020 motion is defeated upon reconsideration, an alternative motion regarding the design option should be passed. And I just want to be clear that some councillors were concerned about this going through and brought it to my attention, and I have the prerogative to bring it back for reconsideration, and that's why it's here tonight. So, but our first and foremost goal here tonight is to defeat the original recommendation before we have further discussion on anything new.
That's our goal, is to defeat it.
Well, for those of you who wanted it brought back, yes. So we
Maybe
need somebody to
Sebastian can just give an update of,
update, yeah.
just so everyone's clear on what the alternatives were back in May.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So ultimately, when when this project was looked at, and when we worked with consultants to figure out, okay, what can we do in Nelson? We knew that there'd be some challenges, right? Because well, we all know the challenges. We all know the challenges. But one of the primary things that needed to happen is to whatever we would come up with, it needed to be a AAA facility. And so AAA means all ages and abilities. So really, there's different ways of doing that. We can do that via shared street. The BC Active Transportation Design Guide gives us the options. Depending on traffic volumes, depending on traffic speeds, you do certain infrastructure. So in this case, when we did when that study was completed, we had two options for High Street. One was the shared street option, and the other one was the one-way with the protected bike lane. The shared street option, essentially, what we're looking at is reducing traffic volumes by closing that intersection at Nelson and Anderson, and also by reducing travel speed by doing certain things such as adding speed humps, and adding signage, things like that. So I think the reason why staff had recommended that option at on the May 4th report was that let's kind of, I'm going to use the word phase it, but let's approach this in different steps. This is kind of our first cycling infrastructure in the city of Nelson, and we wanted to make sure that we were approaching it in a way that we could always adapt and we could always add to it. And what we would really want to avoid is going back and having to remove infrastructure because there's something we hadn't thought about at the time. So it's very much that was the main reason for us going with the shared street. Shared street was still a AAA facility, and it permits us to evaluate if it works. And the great thing about a shared street is that it's easier to implement in other areas of the city. So it's conditioning all the users of the road, so be it cyclists, pedestrians, or motorists, that this is how you share a street. And I think it's important to say that the shared street design was not just adding share the road signs. There was a lot more to it than that. So yeah. So I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter which option we go with. It won't be perfect, but I think ultimately it's a step in the right direction. And I think we need to be able to be flexible and adapt as we move along, because we're fairly new in this game of cycling infrastructure in Nelson, and Nelson is somewhat unique. Well, I would say is definitely unique in terms of our layout. So yeah, we are a small city, but we are very compact. So very much, we function very much as similar to a larger urban center. So I think there's definitely warrant cycling infrastructure. And I think ultimately the shared street was staff's recommendation to council, as it permitted us to really be able to review it, see if it works, and at the end of the day, after a year, if there's some issues, people don't feel safe, we could always come back and add further infrastructure, for example, for protected bike lanes. So I think that kind of summarizes staff's thinking around this, and ultimately I just wanted to make sure that it was clear to council that the shared street was a all ages and abilities infrastructure.
Thank you. Councillor Luckenberg.
Well, I think we probably have to move the recommendation, or and then discussion.
Yeah, move it, exactly. So you need a mover and you a second, Councillor Page?
I'll move it.
Okay, second by Councillor Luckenberg.
Yep, sure.
All right, so it's on the floor for discussion.
I'm sorry, Mayor. This is a unique procedure that we are going by. Under the community charter, you get the power to bring it back as if it's already been moved. All we need is is a vote on the original
To get
May 4th, 2020 motion.
for or against.
For and against.
Right,
Just like it's
okay.
back on the table like it never happened.
Right.
And then depending on that outcome, we will ask for another
So
resolution.
it's on the table, so we just have a vote, that's it, no question, no comments, right?
No discussion?
You can discuss. It's just like it was back on the table. It's been moved and seconded, but no vote has taken place.
Okay, fair enough, okay, go ahead,
Okay, so on
write that.
this is something that, you know, I've had a lot of thought about. I've talked to you, Sebastian. I've talked to, I think, everybody at some point, just to understand the complexity of this issue, because I think we as a council are trying to achieve something pretty big. Like if you look at our Path to 2040 plan and our various plans, the mode shift from vehicle traffic to bike traffic is comprehensive. It's across the city. It's not just 3rd Street, High Street. It's downtown. It's all the way to Rosemont. It's up Stanley and so on. So getting this one right the first time and having the community come along with us, I think is essential for the long term. However, having said that, AAA safety is the line I really want to focus on as what we're trying to achieve here. AAA safety means, for me, that my two nieces and my nephew who live on High Street can bike to Wildflower where they go to school, and other kids, Bowie's 7 years old, Jupiter's 11 now, Watts is going to be learning to bike on High Street. So getting to AAA is, to me, a personal thing. And the way I'm understanding this phased recommendation is we're going to do it inevitably almost in the way we would do it anyways if we went directly to the bike lanes. Not exactly, but more or less, that you can't just build all that infrastructure all at once. You want to get something moving right away, and we can do that with signage, paintings. We can do a lot fairly quickly that we couldn't do if we did the full separated bike lane, in part because there's a lot of unanswered questions, like what do you do about plowing in the wintertime, public consultation with people in the community. So this seems to me like a wise approach to one that brings the community along, and ultimately, and this is the thing I want to emphasize, if we don't get to AAA after this first phase, like if we're not all agreed, if the stakeholders aren't agreed, then we come back and we move to the phase 2, which is the separated bike lane, which I'll put my cards on the table. I think that's ultimately the direction this is going to go, but I'm excited to see if we can do something different. So, thanks.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, so I was the one that put option or the bi-directional lane. So, that's where I do intend or where I think that we're going to go. I know that there has been some pushback in the community, and that I think is to be expected. I am definitely willing to entertain the other option as long as after 1 year we get the report back to council, and what I'm not seeing in the lower motion is that sort of that AAA thing is baked in, as Rick says. And so if we could find a way to put that in not the motion we're currently considering, but the motion that has been proposed because of the reconsideration, then that would be something that I would support. But I guess I would like to ask staff where they would see that would be appropriate language in this lower motion.
Is that not covered by and further that?
It just doesn't say AAA anywhere. And I
I
like
see
to
what
be
you're saying.
very particular with the motions.
Back to county term.
And I think you can,
Yeah.
if you deal with this one, you can put that on the table and
Okay.
make that amendment. Because if you defeat this one, you could always actually put this one right back on the table, right? So it doesn't mean like you could never consider it. So if you
Yeah.
can't get something that satisfies you on that, then
Okay.
it doesn't shut it out.
Councillor Page.
Yeah, when you were first emailing around, Rick, that you were worried about where this would go and what the pushback was, I hear you in terms of worrying that the community will get blowback and be less open to bold moves as we move forward into the realities that are global warming, climate change, and making these kinds of collective shifts we need to make. And so for me, when we pick out from the report from Urban Designs that this is our primary bike route, that this is their preferred option, that This isn't what we're going to be doing to all the streets, but this is how we're creating a backbone within our city that is safe, that is easy to get to from all neighborhoods, and gets you from one point of the city to the other point of the city. I think we need to treat this a little bit differently, and I think we need to treat the middle of this backbone a little bit differently, and it does have to have the accessories, and we do need to put forward that that's where we're going, and kind of, if we are trialing something, let's trial what it looks like when it's two ways for bikes, when the room is preferred for the bikes and not the cars, and figure out what those logistical challenges look like. And I really think we don't want to be watering down these kinds of things right now. We have kind of watered down so much of the action we've been needing to take over the entire, for as long as you've been doing this and I've been alive. The actions have been half measures. I'm sorry, like, and it's not a personal affront. I'm just saying, like, in that time period, we are half as far as we need to be on climate
It's like
change.
point of order.
Fair enough.
Seriously.
Fair enough. But I just think we're half as far as we need to be on this work of climate change, and we're again here at a junction point being asked to water down something. And I think we need to say this is part of our primary bike network. This is the core of it. This is where we're starting, and bikes are the preference on this street. And there is room for local traffic, but bikes are the preference. Bikes are what we're doing first. And start piloting that, because I don't know if we really have much more time to do the half steps.
Can I just clarify, Sebastian? So what's our numbers now that we have to get to make it AAA? Because that's basically all we're doing is going, lots of people use that as a cutoff to, get downtown, 2 minutes earlier than if they stayed on the highway. We're gonna, basically, the strategy is get all that traffic off that street, so it's more like third, as opposed to what it's used for
High
now.
Street.
So that's what we're trying to achieve, and I forget how many cars we have to get off to get at that AAA rating, but that's really what we're trying to do. And if we can't do that, then you have to go to the next option is to separate bike lanes, and where they do in high traffic areas. And the only, as far as I understand, they do that because there's too much traffic. Just like, everybody has to get down there, right? So we want, if you're coming down whatever Bell or Gordon or whatever street you're coming down to get there, to go across the city, we want all those streets to be low traffic streets so that people feel comfortable going down there, other than it's 80 degrees.
Councillor Rockenberg, okay, for the first time. And,
So, as far as I understand this, we would be reducing traffic onto High Street because of the what would you call it?
Intersection.
The intersection there here at Nelson Avenue and Anderson.
Yeah.
So we're actually on one end of the street. We're actually stopping traffic from entering, even if it's two-way. Right, we're stopping a large portion of the traffic from skirting across the intersection
Exactly.
and
you're diverting it onto,
Keep it on the highway.
keep it on the highway. So, I think for me, like originally I voted for the protected bike lane because of the successes I saw in Vancouver and how hard they worked to get them, and now they're extremely used and super beneficial for that city. I mean, we're not Vancouver, of course, but I think for me, if this blockage is really going to happen in tandem with the two-way, then you are probably reducing traffic on that, I don't know, at least by half, if not more. So it'd become a much quieter street. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's all part of it. I mean, we're calling it a shared street, but essentially it's called a neighborhood bikeway, similar to 3rd Street, and a lot of municipalities are. I think the thinking at one point was to put bike infrastructure on busy arterial, and then put a lot of protection in there so that it worked. But I think some municipalities are going towards a neighborhood bikeway because they're noticing that they, one, put less infrastructure, and two, it's more of a pleasant environment for cyclists. So essentially with High Street, because we're for the most part already at 30 kilometers an hour, which is the speed limit you want to be at for a neighborhood bikeway, which is a shared street. And
that is currently 30 kilometers an hour?
Signs up
for the
there.
most part,
Yeah, for years.
yeah,
actually.
yeah. There's one section that still has 40, but I mean that's an easy switch. And the second part is to bring vehicle counts lower down towards 1,000 vehicle. So we're looking to cut them by half. And I think the blocking the intersection is one piece of it, but also once we start painting and once we start really promoting that this is part of the bike corridor, I think we're sending out the message that, there will be more cyclists on this corridor. So if you're uncomfortable sharing the road with the cyclists, there's alternate routes that you can use. And I think that will take maybe, it will take a few months or maybe a year for people to get accustomed to that. And then I think that will bring the vehicle counts, we'll cut the vehicle counts in addition to some of the infrastructure work we're doing. So, yeah, I think it's conditioning, right? It's a new reality. So, it'll take a bit of time to get there, but.
Can I just add a supplemental?
Certainly, yeah.
So just on a snow plowing issue, which is a huge issue in this town, of course. I'm looking at the urban systems maps here, and you can really see how the two-way would make that whole process, much simpler. So I get their logic behind it. Part of me is like sort of saddened because of Councillor Page's, ideas of like we have to make these bold moves, and if we don't, we can, we just end up watering down. But I do think that
I'm the one who does the watering now.
Thank you, Mayor.
But that's where we're drowning with sea level.
long as he's been alive.
For years, as long as I've been alive.
Wasting good scratch.
But I think for me, the key for this being really functional is having that blockage on that big intersection. So you're cutting off all that traffic rushing into
All those
town.
North Shore people.
Yeah, including myself. And I use High Street all the time, and I've cycled on High Street all the time. So that's for me the key piece is to having that blockage, but still having the two-way. I could see it working. So thank you.
Councillor Renwick, and then Councillor Lockenberg, unless Councillor Morrison has something. No.
Thank you.
Councillor Renwick.
I'm glad this came back. As you know, I voted against it last time. And unlike my friend Councillor Page, I would like to see us try this first with the two-way traffic before we put up permanent barriers. I think there's some issues with permanent barriers on High Street, snowplowing is one, but there are people that live there that have to park there, and they park on some of those blocks. They park on both sides of the street, and I have heard some concerns of how do I get out? Which way do I go? I have some concerns with the traffic from the tourist park. And the other thing about putting in, adding more infrastructure to our infrastructure is, where's that funding coming from? Because we get about that much from a bike rider in this town. They don't put gas in, they don't buy a license, and somebody's gotta pay for this.
Well, we don't get any, that's all provincial taxation.
No, it's not all provincial tax. Some of this, we have to come good for.
Yeah, we get a portion of it in a grant,
Yeah.
potentially a grant for some of it, for this.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm just throwing it out there to say, this is all great and I'm for it, don't get me wrong, but I think we have to be creative or look at things. Maybe there's places in the world where if you're gonna ride a bike in Nelson, it's gotta be licensed, there's a fee to pay. I don't know, you can't charge to put air in the tires, but I think it's something we need to think about, because if we're talking about doing this all over town, somebody's gotta pick up that bill. People just,
There used to be bike license years ago. Councillor Luxembourg's next. Yeah.
Well, part of, just to, this is not my main point, but to answer your question or comment,
plate for your bike.
Councillor Renwick,
No, I used
the roads,
every year.
you know, the roads cost us as a society to fund, and that's what the vehicles are paying for. Like the funding that they're putting into the meters or whatever is going to fund the roads that they're then damaging that we have to replace over time. Whereas bikes will damage the roads less, and so we'll make the money back in the fact that there's almost no impact from the bikes on the road. So that'll hopefully,
And that's
as we,
it's a separate issue from what we're dealing with tonight.
yeah, I just wanted to.
It's real, but it's somewhat.
It's a little bit different, but it's a fair point. But to Councillor Page's, I totally feel like I understand Councillor Page's argument on this one, and it was something that I felt really when we initially voted for this, and I thought that was, we've got to make these moves. But then, you know, after hearing feedback, you know, after 2 of 3 of our councillors didn't vote for it, you know, you never want to go in on a 4-3 basis on something that's going to be have such an impact on the city and be something that we're going to be building on year over year. It's not like this is a one-time thing, so you don't. It's not a great start. I'd really prefer to have the mayor and the full council in a unanimous support behind it. But also, I do think, you know, staff put a lot of thought into this, and after hearing from Sebastian and Kevin and the mayor on this one, it started to, the complexities of the situation really revealed itself. It's not just the plowing. It's the some of those residences, I've heard really vigorous debates between which direction traffic should flow. And on that, between 2 residents that both wanted to see a bike lane there, they just couldn't agree on how. And so when you have that kind of complexity, you don't want to just rush in and start, you know, overriding, you know, staff's considered decision. It's certainly the staff's process in developing this. So the other thing about this that I like in terms of the phased approach is that it'll allow us to gather more data.
So, Councillor Luxembourg, if I could just focus back to the actual resolution that we may or may not defeat.
Okay.
Because now we're talking about
Sure, I'll leave it at that.
the second one that's proposed. Somewhat. So I'm going to call the question on the first one. Sorry, did you have something to add?
I had something to add. I want to clarify, like, what we're asking here is to pilot something. Like, at this stage, we're not asking to drill things into the cement. We're asking to say, what does it look like when traffic mode is put this way to the full effect as recommended in the report from the consultant for this center of our bike lane? Like, I've seen examples of garden boxes used. I've seen examples of cement being used. This doesn't necessarily require that we commit and build everything full up front. We're still asking, or at least I'm still asking, that we pilot this mode, this way of having 2 ways for bikes, 1 ways for car. And to Councillor Renwick's point, there, regardless of how we got to the current system, like, yes, we found ways to cost in the customers and how they use it through gas tax, and now we're moving to electric, and ICBC is moving towards looking at charging a per kilometer through your insurance. We are going to have to figure out how to cost these things in an environment where the gas engine is not the primary mode of transportation. And that's just a cost. I think what Rick was getting to, like, society will have to figure out how to cost. But we don't want to incentivize an inefficiency in the market simply because that's how our current system is structured to get the funding from it. If there's costs that we're not actually capturing, the internal combustion engine isn't even close to accounting for the cost it's causing to the rest of the planet and all the shared resources. And I have a real problem, and I think it's worth voicing that council had this discussion. We prepared for this meeting, and then after the fact, conversations were being had about whether or not this is something we should have. Like, that we would pass something, and then one councillor who was for it would be told or discussed, or it would be debated behind after the fact of the meeting that this wasn't going to work and this shouldn't happen, and all of that stuff needed to be happening at the table. The discussion for this needed to
clarify
happen.
that's not what happened. Councillor Lautenberg asked if he could bring this back. It wasn't anybody reached out to Councillor Lautenberg. He reached out to staff. Can this be brought back? And basically that was all. Here's how you bring it back. And that is allowed in the community charter. There's a reason for that.
And-
Can I just also, the only challenge, if we get that grant, we have to build something with it. That's the $1 million question, and that's the only thing I asked Sebastian to do. If council reconsidered this and chose the two-way option, you know, can we spend that grant in a way that we're not, then it doesn't work, and then all of a sudden we're removing stuff, and that didn't make a lot of sense, and I think he shared that with you. It's just a painted line that would change under the two options, so that's the only work we did, was to, because that's the thing that's, you know, if we get this grant and it seems fairly positive at this stage, we need to spend it, and we have to spend it, you know, on A or B, and B right now is a permanent divided thing, so it's not a pilot. You need to spend it on those barriers or whatever.
So,
Because I think you guys are debating
Yeah,
the next
the
motion,
next, exactly.
which you
that's-
could, we don't know what that next motion is.
Right.
But I should clarify, because it was about how
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
came to. So in the council page, just to clarify, in the last on May 4th when we brought it up, there was this sort of moment of after the debate happened, kind of before the debate, but certainly after the debate, was like, well, wait a second. Already there's some complexities here that can't we trial this? Because there was, if you remember, there was that confusion about like, wait a second, is it all in on this, or can we phase this in somehow? And so knowing that we had a 4-3, that there was significant opposition just in the room there, I was feeling like, okay, this is not a good, auspicious beginning for what's going to be a big, long-term project or transformation for the city. So I did reach out to Sebastian and Kevin and the mayor to understand what was the challenge, what was the problem, what was I missing. And then I went on the street, I started talking to people. I probably biked it 8 times. I drove it. I did everything to really and I couldn't figure it out. I was like, I don't know how this is gonna, what the best way to do this is. And so that's when I asked, like, we need to reconsider this, because I think the phased approach where we learn as we go and we build, you know, political capital as we go and bring the community along with us is the only way I can see this being a success. So that, just to clarify on that.
yeah, so if I may, I think it was my turn. Thank you.
And then we gotta try and wrap up.
Yeah, so
please.
I understand. So what just does concern me is what I heard from our city manager was that, you know, we have this funding option, we need to spend it now, and like this opportunity might not come again. So that, you know, I prefer the idea that we pilot what we intend to do so that we can, you know, we don't have it one way and realize it should have been the other way. You know, that we can figure out, you know, how it works best for the neighborhood and that the neighborhood could get used to it. What I'm worried is that we go with the bi-directional traffic, and then if we do go with bi-directional traffic, we're not going to get funding to do a separated bike lane, maybe for another, you know, 20 years, and that opportunity is lost.
I think there's an ongoing program for this. And it's ultimately up to you. If council feels that's a priority, I think what we're hearing clearly is you wanted a AAA rated road, right?
Absolutely.
And if it doesn't meet that standard, and the only way it can meet the standard at two-way right now is getting that traffic off it and getting that speed down. If we can't achieve that, then you're kind of forced into the next option. And like I said, the only thing I asked Sebastian was, you know, if we built this stuff, would we have to rip half of it out to kind of change that? And he said, no, it's just a one lane.
Yeah, there's different ways of doing this, but like one of the things we're considering to reduce speed, vehicle speed, is to do speed humps. But I think our preferred approach would be to actually use the ones that are considered temporary, that you bolt in and bolt out, and that way we can, because I know there's a lot of pushback about nobody's cycling in the wintertime, and the plows don't do
like
well
those.
on that. So that's something we can easily remove for 2-3 months out of the year, put them back in, and
And you put a gap in them where a cyclist can go right through.
yeah,
them.
exactly.
Pretty common.
Yeah, we're gonna design our own stencil for the Sharrow, so our crews will be able to repaint those every year. You know, we're pretty confident that there's certain infrastructure that we can play around with. We can test out. For example, if you put a speed hump somewhere and it's that was a stupid location, it doesn't work because something we hadn't thought about. Well, we can take the bolts out and just move it a little further. So I think we want to make sure that we're really adaptable here. And I think, from my perspective, it's rapid implementation is try to get this whole prime bike route, which is from one end of town to the other, within the next 5 years, by having success at every stage and not by having to create major changes to our circulation network. I think that way, once we get that in, and hopefully in the next 5 years, then we can start re-looking at it and adapting as required. But I think, I mean, the City of Calgary is an example of rapid implementation. They didn't put necessarily big costly infrastructure, but they did it quickly, and that's what really got the momentum going for them. So I think that's part of it. And to Kevin's point, yes, we've applied for infrastructure funding, and we're hoping to hear back this week. But yeah, we'll need to get that project completed by the end of the year. So we're going to be moving fast here.
Regardless of what option we go with.
You have to pick one or the other.
Yeah,
ultimately.
correct. Yeah, we need to know, because the next component of this is, you know, we've got conceptual design, but we need to go to detailed design. How does it all like look? Is there drainage involved? Things like that. So, you know, we're slowly inching towards detailed design. There's a few bits and pieces we need to do at very low cost that we've moved forward on. That doesn't matter which one we choose, but yeah. So we need to get going, and if we do get the funding, they're expecting us to, you know, they're expecting this to be shovel ready.
You get, okay.
So if we're gonna go, let's go
Okay,
strong.
so I'm gonna call the question. All in favor?
So this is, okay.
Yeah,
This is
this
a
is
reconsideration of the motion.
Reconsideration.
reconsideration of the motion.
Right. So,
All in favor?
Wait,
You're
I think we
reconsidering.
don't know
Hold
what
on.
we
You're voting
want.
in favor of the motion that was passed.
Yeah.
Oh,
Keep that in mind. So if you're against it, do not
you.
vote
Yeah.
in favor of it.
okay, got it.
aren't we doing the first section? Don't we have to get rid of that?
You're re-voting on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just
having
voting
that
on the
as a
original
two-way.
motion.
Okay,
I know.
okay.
Considering the May 4th motion right now.
Redo
It's on the table.
As it was presented.
So we're-
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, as it was
Yeah,
presented.
it was
Okay.
presented.
As it was passed.
Damn it, I thought I won,
Rewind.
Janice.
I know, me
So
too.
that
Done
means
now.
if you,
It's like,
if you
yes.
vote in favor, it's off. If you vote in favor, then we're moving on to another option, which is the other
No,
one.
you'd have to defeat this,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
If you
I'm
vote
so
to
confused.
defeat,
No,
Just to be
you're
clear.
saying it wrong.
So right now, it says a separated bike lane. That's back on the table, and you vote on that.
Okay.
So if you don't want it to be a separated bike lane, you vote against it. If you
Okay.
want it to be a separated bike lane, you vote for it.
okay?
You're just having that vote again.
All in favor of the motion sitting in front of you, which is number one. So that will be, those of you who
Separated bike
want
lane.
number one, those of you who want number one,
Yeah.
Okay.
I know what I voted on
all
both
right,
times.
okay, okay.
You almost had them.
all
Yeah, I
right,
know.
yeah. Opposed? Okay, so it's defeated. So now we're on to
New motion, if you want to.
a new motion which is in front of you right there, that council approve the following design option for the city of Nelson High Street and Third Street cycling infrastructure. Conceptual design report dated February the 11th, High Street corridor option 2, two-way motor vehicle travel with traffic calming and shared use lanes.
And you could add to achieve a AAA
Yes.
Yes.
rating.
Can we add that in there? Well, I guess someone has to.
You're welcome, and there's further that, it can be added into that if you wish. So if somebody wishes to do that, you're more than
Move
welcome. Councillor Morrison,
Moving it as is or with?
No, I'll move it with the AAA,
and further that the direct,
wherever it goes in there.
okay, further that staff are directed to monitor the bike route project along High Street corridor for 1 year, and then report back to council and determine whether the corridor should be transition or dedicated bike lane. Now you want to add in,
So I think the AAA rating should be to determine whether AAA rating has been achieved or if the corridor should be transitioned to a dedicated bike lane. Did you do that?
That makes sense, yeah.
That sounds reasonable, yeah. You got that?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You
And
okay?
I'm
You
seconding
okay,
that.
Councillor Moore? Moved by Councillor Morrison, you're accepting that, second by Councillor Anderson. Any questions or comments on that? Go ahead.
As the mover, so I just like to say that at the original meeting, I voted against going with the one-way traffic. And that was based on, I asked staff why, because I went to the meeting and I heard a lot of people say that they wanted to have one-way. And I have to say that I had, as Councillor Lockenberg went out and to speak to all of us, that I have cycled on that road a lot over the years. And in my mind, it should be one way. But the problem for me is that in my mind, I had distinctly which direction that should go one way. And when I was at that meeting, although I heard a lot of people saying that, is I heard the issue that Councillor Lockenberg, when he went back out again to fish around, heard, and that is, you can have two people in the same block tell you that it needs to go in the opposite direction. And that is what I heard when I was at that meeting. And then I went back and I looked and I looked and I looked and I looked. And for the life of me, and then I tried to look at the city bigger than that one street. Because, you know, as much as there's some that maybe want cars to go away, they're not leaving anytime really soon. And so then what do you do with traffic and where does it go and how does the traffic move around that? And I mean, and there's other streets in this town that we probably need to be making one way. There's going to be other streets that are going to have to be modified as we extend this active transportation plan, particularly into Rosemont, which is super challenging. I think that's why we've got to this phase 3. But I really, I like this idea, and I liked what staff told me, and I depend a lot on staff reports when I come to these meetings. It's not that I'm lazy. It's not like I didn't go out and look at the issue. It's not like I didn't go to the public meeting. But at the end of the day, I kind of thought, oh, it's going to come and staff is going to say one way. And I was really surprised that they said no to maintain the two-way traffic. My question was answered. I felt confident with that. And I knew then, after listening to staff talk at the last meeting, that I would not be supporting going with a one-way traffic at this time. So I like this motion. I think we've got a lot of bike routes to build within the city, and I really support this, and I really want to see us move and get on with getting this project done so that we can get that linkage from the bridge into the downtown core.
Thanks very much, Councillor Morrison. Another thing, I want to, like Councillor Morrison, I walked the street, I drove the street, I cycled the street, and there's 11 people that back onto that street at any given day. That their driveway is just literally off the street and they back out onto it. And it was something I didn't realize for the longest time. So then I started counting, and there's 11 properties that back onto it. It's not an easy street even with this concept, to be honest with you. But anyway, okay, any further comments, Councillor?
No, I had a comment, but I couldn't have said it better than Councillor Morrison.
Okay, so all in favor of the motion with the addition from Councillor Anderson? Carried, thanks very much. Thank you.
Do you wish to be recorded, Councillor Page?
No, it's fine.
Yeah, you're on TV.
I accept the
Sebastian,
will of
thanks
council.
very much.
Okay.
Pamela, thanks for sticking around.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Watch your head.
Make your life more difficult.
It's a gentle stew.
Yeah, watch your head there. Okay, next one is another
Burn in the
conversation for us
fires
to have
cause
tonight.
climate change with the rest of you.
Each year, Council is required to submit an official recommendation to the Regional District of Central Kootenay.
Thank you,
Board
guys.
identifying the project that City Council supports and endorses to receive funding under the Columbia Basin Trust Community Initiatives Program. Council is now requested to pass the resolution with the required recommendation. And there's a couple in yellow here, and I think Sebastian will give you a little bit of an outline on that so that we're all...
Gabe?
Or Kevin?
Gabe. He's Gabe, Sebastian
He's
left.
Gabe.
Oh, sorry, Gabe, I beg your pardon, Gabe. Somebody will, anyway.
It's getting late. I'll defer to the city manager. Thanks.
So after sort of more exploration, what we will recommend is that $7,000, that is the one that's up in the air, be allocated to the, basically the city of Nelson through the Nelson and District Youth Center to help run that market this year. So that's the only change.
The only caveat I would say is that the youth center will have to make a scope change request
Yeah.
for approval.
And we have to get that, I thought it was the end of May we were supposed to get it to.
They need this June 1st, so I was gonna send it tonight.
Okay.
The scope change.
Okay, so that's
just
the recommendation that,
Right.
you have something in writing?
Yeah, all we'd do is change the West Kootenai Community Eco Society to does it have to be the city of Nelson, because the youth center's not an entity, right?
That's correct.
Flash.
So the youth center project is currently on that list. It was funded in the amount of $3,971 from the city of Nelson. It's the Corporation of the City of Nelson NDYC Gardens and Cooks program. That's
So there's that one, and the yellow one, so that would be the same thing for that 7,000. So basically you would be allocating about 14,000 and some change to the youth center to help support the farmers market this year.
Just so that the numbers add up, CAO Climactic, the city of Nelson funded that project. The proposal was to fund it for $3,971. The 7,000 comes because that project has sought money from outside the city of Nelson, just so that the numbers aren't confusing to council. Does that make sense?
So the 7,900 that shows
Yeah,
is including the ask to the other regional areas.
Partners, yeah.
Partners. So what they've received or been approved for from the city of Nelson council is 3,900.
oh, okay,
Plus 7,000 is 10,900.
right, okay.
What staff is proposing is that on top of that 3,971, we
okay.
add the 7,000 that has not yet been allocated.
Okay. All right, so is everybody clear as mud?
And so, and just so then, the Nelson Isuzu Friendship Society is gonna get $4,128.
That's correct.
Right.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, so that's the only change.
Are we moving?
Okay, we need
has
a
we
mover,
moved this yet?
we need a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Renwick, second by Councillor Page. Okay, you had a comment, either one of you?
Actually, yeah, it's not substantial.
You don't, okay. Councillor Renwick, you okay? No. Anybody else? Okay, all in favor? Carried, thanks very much. All right,
Sorry, I just had one
We have
question,
late
so
items.
just a kind of a follow-up. So all these lovely organizations that we debated and talked about and have given some money to,
all right.
when will they
Ratify
be
them.
able to consider, when will they be getting their checks so that the public knows, like when? There could
You
be
guys
people
have to
listening
pass it
when-
at the RD now.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
That'll be
to you
furnished to
now.
you. When's your next meeting, John?
2 weeks, Thursday.
So it'll
I'll
probably be
there.
on the agenda for that, I would suggest.
Depends on whether or not everybody else has got theirs done. We usually do the whole
At the same time?
Well, the
bunch at the same
deadline's
time.
today.
Yeah, but whether or not they get, the smaller groups get it all in time,
And the CBT administrates it, so we can check with them if you'd like.
yeah. So I imagine that, there's the odd time when there's something held over like to like another month, but for the majority of it, it all comes through on one council, one board meeting.
All right,
All right, we have a late item, two late items, actually. One from our staff and one from Councillor Morrison.
Shouldn't we do the?
Wait, are we not doing the minutes, the reports and the letters?
You want to get, okay, sorry.
just
go ahead.
receipt.
Move receipt of
Wait, I have to look up our
minutes, reports and letters.
I had a few
Unless
things to
there's one
pick
you want to
out.
pull out.
I had some stuff to pull out.
Okay, so let's go to the minutes first then. Advisory Planning, Housing Committee, Cultural Development, Nelson Public Library.
ABC.
And move the rest for receipt.
Move receipt for the rest.
Yeah, I'll move receipt.
For Woodward, second by Councillor Anderson, okay?
Sure.
All in favor? Carried, okay, now, APC.
Yeah, I see within the APC,
You
is
just
it
lost
you?
the planning stuff.
Back around. You're the one sitting on that, Cal?
No,
Rick is.
Okay. So it says here that council, they passed a motion asking that council approve the amendment to the zoning bylaw to increase residential density in the C2 zone with no limit in density, and that the changes be applicable to the entire C2 zone.
So where are you looking?
Yeah, within the APC minutes, I believe in February,
Yeah, so
they
this
were
is,
looking at when we were adding in density to the C2 zone, and they wanted to.
Cal was still. You see in February?
No,
my
you're
understanding,
Kev,
what's the
maybe Kevin,
question
This
then?
is best for Kevin.
Yeah, what's the question then?
So they this motion at APC to come to us, is that been incorporated into stuff we've passed with staff, or do we want to have a discussion about what the APC is asking from us?
No, we took that to APC. That all started, I think I'm on the right track there. That started when, I think it was Bergevin's building. They wanted to convert some commercial to
Yep.
residential. So
Which allowed us to.
yeah, so you guys passed that.
Yeah,
I think
we
this is just late. This, you already had that recommendation from the APC when
Okay.
you considered that?
Okay, sorry. Yeah. I
Yep,
couldn't-
no.
it
I
wasn't-
have one quick question.
On the APC?
Yeah, when did it become the Path to 2040 APC?
48? Well, we decided to move that up.
Shane,
Yeah, I don't know if they,
No,
was
joking.
it official?
what we did do was have representation from those 4 pillars.
Okay.
I don't think we all ever called it the Path to 2040.
Well, that's what it's named in
APC.
here.
The
That's what it's
meeting of
named
the
in the
past
document.
2040 advisory committee.
Councillor Lautenberg, is that you?
I mean, it would have been,
That's right.
but I didn't.
Yeah, you were.
But I'll take credit
you
for
were
it.
present.
You're like, yeah, okay.
Sure.
That was my only
No, I
question.
had no idea.
Committees can't change their names, that's
Okay.
council.
I didn't know that.
But that was the principles are the 4 pillars.
So, just to address that, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you.
I was curious myself, and so I did take a quick look just now at the bylaw from 2012, and so that is actually the title of the bylaw, Path to 2040 Advisory Planning Commission Bylaw.
Okay, perfect. Thank
Who
you.
knew?
It's,
Someone
I've
did.
never,
Well,
I,
that
I've never
changes
noticed.
Everything.
No, we're doing it at the housing committee next.
All right. We're all good? Thanks, Councillor Page. All right, next is reports. Anything you want to, no sign of the old rusty moose
Rusty
on
Moose
there?
is in
or
there?
anything?
I got one.
Something I want to
No?
talk about.
I got one for CFO McClure. What are you buying from Big Ass Fans?
Yes,
what I do.
I saw that on there. Councillor. I wondered if that was coming.
I was hoping
So-
we had missed that.
So it is a catchy name for a company.
I
and-
know
oh,
about Big Ass
Okay,
Fans.
so there's been a successful one at the NDCC. They put that in to help out with this,
Yes.
and so we have one being put in the Nelson Youth Center. Really helps in the wintertime in particular to kind of push the warm air that rises in there back down into the thing. Hopefully, we'll get some benefits from that big ass purchase.
Big Ass Fans.
Big ass fans, but not a big ass price.
Okay, so could somebody move receipt of the?
I just wanted to make a comment within the procurement report. I had been noticing in the alerts we're getting the new implementation of the bonfire bidding system, which seems like quite an improvement over the system we saw at the beginning of our term. And I just wanted to pass my congratulations and thanks off to the team, because I know those things can be helpful and hard to implement. So
Yeah, well, and thanks,
looks like
Councillor.
a nice system.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Page. And again, one of the situations, if you can take a positive out of the pandemic, is things like this. They're allowing us have a trial of some software. So again, that allows us for, instead of kind of an old school style of how our bids came in and that sort of thing, and tracking them to be able to do it electronically, can be very helpful. And we were looking at this product, and then the fact that this has happened and people can't go do things, they kind of said, hey, you want to try this out and we were like, this is great opportunity. And we're seeing some good positive results from it.
It's great. So my question was, it says it's going to be live by mid-May. Is it live?
It is live, yeah.
Awesome.
And the part that has been very positive for procurement in particular. So if Public Works wants to look at, or even for, I would say, our manager Sinstat for one of his projects he puts out, like how popular is this?
Totally.
And he can go and see who's actually gone and downloaded. And before, you send it out there, you have no idea whether or not anyone's interested. You say, oh wow, we've got 5 people that have already kind of downloaded the package. And so yeah, no, we're seeing some very good success from it so far.
Awesome.
Good work.
Thanks, Councilor Page.
Thank you.
Good, thanks very much. Okay, somebody move receipt. Oh,
No, I
Janice?
just want to comment on the fact that in these reports, because it kind of like they're all tied together here. I do want to recognize the annual report, short and sweet, summarized by the library. I look at this report, I don't use the library all that often myself, but they're a hopping organization and they deserve every penny they get. And it'll be really nice if one day some of those resolutions go to the UBCM to restore funding, provincial funding for libraries actually comes to fruition, because I know that every penny of that would be put to very good use in our public library in the city of Nelson.
I agree. My little comment to myself was the little library that could, because it's just, they do amazing.
Good job.
And I've said it before, and I'll just toot their horn a little bit more, that me and Jesse are both participating in governance training that the library has put in place, because the BCLTA works very hard to create programming and provide opportunities for its trustees to do learning environments. And this one's particularly about advocating and fundraising within the context of the library. But these courses they put together are really world class. Like, it's top notch, and it is one of the most fulfilling boards that I sit at. I'm really honored for the work that these guys do, and I'm glad you picked out some of that stuff out of their report, because it's great.
Thank you. Good job. All right, did we
Move
pass?
receipt.
Move receipt, okay, seconded by somebody. Councillor Anderson, all in favor? Carried, thanks very much. And letters,
Move
receipt.
receipt.
Kootenai Lunch Club, Councillor Anderson, second by Councillor Renwick, all in favor? Carried, thanks very much. Lead items, we have two, and the first one is a lead item on the Fire Smart, and whereas Council supports the Nelson Fire and Rescue Service plan to continue the important Fire Smart work, community awareness and promotion of Fire Smart principles, and conduct wildfire mitigation work as part of a shared responsibility to minimize impact of wildfires. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nelson Fire and Rescue Service be authorized to resubmit the proposal of fuel management and Fire Smart activities for 2019-2020, application in the amount of $77,000 for 2019 and $70,000 for 2020 in grant funding under UBCM Community Resilience Investment Program. And further, that Nelson Fire and Rescue Service staff be responsible for the overall grant management.
I'll move it.
Moved
Second.
by Councillor Woodward and second by Councillor
Actually,
Anderson.
Councillor, she
Was
moved
that
it.
moved by Councillor Anderson? second by
Anderson
Councillor-
and Woodward.
All right, thank you. All right, done.
We have to
Should we
vote.
call the
One
question?
more.
All in
We have to
favor?
vote this.
All in favor? Carried. One more.
Yep, one more. Okay, so, thank you for letting me bring this late item. For 2020, the annual UBCM will be moving to a virtual platform. And whereas council supports the 25-point recovery plan, and whereas this could be an exciting project for the city of Nelson to take the lead on as we consider our local economic health, therefore, that staff enter into discussions with the RDCK to investigate Nelson hosting viewing of the virtual UBCM using different venues around the city, such as the Civic Center, the NDCC, the Prestige Hotel, and other venues that would allow for appropriate social distancing.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any comment at all?
Can staff vote?
But you can comment, though.
Yeah.
We'll make it work.
Yeah, so the only question I have is, you wanted to include the regional district as a partner in this?
Yeah,
A joint application, is that what you're thinking?
Well, I don't know that we apply. It's just more about the fact that we somehow work together to have that happen. 'Cause I don't know that there's going to be any funding. Like, it's hard to say what they've just announced that they're going to go virtual.
Yeah.
But they're going to try to make it interactive. And I don't know if you saw the email I circulated, but the whole idea there is that when you think about how it works, there's like plenary sessions, there's breakout sessions. We have the capacity here in the city to have plenary rooms, or we could have large screening, and we can also have in hotels or smaller venues, we can have breakout rooms, because of course, as we all know, maybe 3 people want to go to that breakout, so you don't have to have huge rooms for that. It's just about having the technology so that you can
Yep.
stream to be able to see it. And then we have some of the major sponsors that sponsor the UBCM are right here in our backyard, like ILMA, Tech. We have Mercer. You know, we have
Selkirk paving.
yeah.
I think the only one, we'll just have to check with UBCM, we're not offside on the regulations
Yeah,
somehow.
and maybe we don't use them, but then at the same time, as if we can, then we'll just use.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that they would sponsor, and we could
I'll
use
fund.
different restaurants
Yeah, we could fund
to
ourselves.
figure out how to fund it. But I mean, and so it'd be more of the trying to figure out the funding a little bit.
I'm sorry, Janice, when you read that out, I didn't hear the date you were.
Well, the dates are going to be the same dates as UBCM, so it's I included this 3 days. It's in the last week of September.
So, from what I gather, Air Canada may not be flying in here.
Hold on.
We don't need
What-
them. No, we're not flying them in here.
No, I
Like
understand,
it's
but
virtual.
No, I understand. But the facilities you're setting up will be just for regional people?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, fair enough.
yes.
Just us. Just the like.
No,
I just thought the
we're
city
gonna do
of Nelson-
UBCM here.
No, but I thought there'd be some people would have to come in.
No,
No, it's all
Staff would
virtual. So it'd be like we'd be sitting in the Civic Theater
We would be
watching Horrigan give his presidential address.
Okay, good.
Well, and why I liked your idea so much was because when I saw that, I'm thinking like, oh, does that mean I'm sitting home for 3 days?
Well,
Sort
exactly.
of participating completely independently, you know, and it's a very different experience than being there in person. So I think that what you've proposed is a really nice hybrid that allows us to, you know, sort of feel the sense of the event and not that sort of monotony of being at home on another video session, Zoom call. You know, and we can be socially distanced, but also.
And I think it might be a really good bridge building exercise with the RD.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we aren't actually, it's not like we're with the RD at a 1,000-person event. It's just gonna be
Yeah.
the city and the RD together.
Maybe Castlegar and.
Yeah, but it is Cas. I'm talking about the whole RD, and so my number, like, I was thinking that we'd be 50, but I counted everybody. If everybody sent their whole council and one staff member, we need like 70 or 80. So hopefully by the time we get to phase 3, that
Kevin's face.
The only word of caution is putting all of you in one room.
Yeah.
If someone ended up sick and you got every single elected official and
Be
senior
great.
staff,
We just blame Janice.
because you might just want to, you know, have smaller 20s
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stick with your cohort of 20 instead of.
Yeah, assign ABC to groups, stick with your group.
well, that's that whole thing is I think with
That way we
breakout
can work
rooms
out
that you're
those
not going to
details.
have everybody. You're not going to have everybody. So the venue can be big enough if you had the 50.
I just would be.
That's a
but-
how, we're in
I
the
just
weeds.
Okay, so we're in the
Needs-
planning
needs,
stage
yeah.
now.
It needs-
I
told
want
you,
to
I'm
make
not
an
gonna be in the
application
weeds.
because
There.
they'll probably have criteria if
Yeah.
they're gonna, so.
You don't really know.
All right, so,
I think what's important is this provides an opportunity to do investment in some of our local facilities. There are going to be people who are going to be like, you know what, I'm going to step it up a little bit. There's going to be some upgrades to maybe bandwidth, screens, technology. So we're going to leave a little bit of a legacy behind. Everyone kind of can get together in safe, isolated groups, which is a bit of an economic boost for people. And we might even be showing a bit of a hybrid model, so you don't feel the urgency. You have to send every single member to UBCM in the future. You can leave some behind if you so desire. There's more of a regional component to it. I think this is where the world is moving.
Yeah.
We're just again demonstrating that Nelson is in
Willing
front
to
of
take
where the
that
world
step.
is going.
It's good practice for AKBLG for next year if it happens.
Who's going to
Ditto.
sponsor the after party?
Oh.
Al Redman.
Toyota. Toyota.
On
So
the
anyways,
fifth
it's just
floor.
a thought. So,
Okay, guys,
are we in favor?
We have many nights.
we need all in favor? Carried, okay, so Janice, you'll have to work closely with the crew
No,
here.
I don't. No, I just asked the question how. I don't. Why? I
Leave
don't
that to
ask
somebody
fix
else?
the how.
Well, I'm sure me and Rick have
Okay, we still have some work to do.
some for hour.
Yeah,
And
we-
Brady.
just a minute.
But
We're
no.
gonna adjourn this meeting
Sure.
and reconvene the in-camera meeting because we still have to finish a report with
I'll,
Kevin, so. Motion to adjourn,
Second.
second by Kevin. So you got a pee break out there.